Even though I have spiritual beliefs, I still believe, I still believe in evolution. I've seen conditions or whoever you choose as a partner changes the person, whether it's animals. I've seen animals, I've seen birds in my country. I've seen them evolve over time because the environment changes and all those kind of things. So I believe humans too. Uh, when it comes to survival of the fittest, whoever is the strongest and whoever is the most attractive to the opposite mate, and all those kind of things. And if something catastrophic happens, whoever survives that catastrophic event, all those things dictate how, and also diet. They dictate evolution uh, and what leads you up to the point we are right now.
Right, right. I like that. And I definitely agree. Animals, plants,
Mhm.
just all life, it'll definitely show you how it's being. There's definitely a pattern to how they're being affected around the world.
Yeah.
I think it'd be appropriate to introduce yourself. Like we got Arnold, and what's your last name? I'll just call you Arnold the archaeologist. But
It, I never. It's funny enough. I've never had a nickname my whole life. Even in Kenya, I never had a nickname. But I created a Twitter account, and I decided to just name myself Mlunje, like Mlunje, like it's just like a nickname for like my tribe, Luya. So I just said Mlunje.
Lunge, did I
Mlunje.
say it right? Lunge
Yeah, you said it correctly. Yeah.
or Lunge? All right,
Um,
this is it. Do I look Kenyan? Do I look a little Kenyan?
you look South African.
South African?
Yeah.
Okay.
You look like the
Just
Bantus who have admixture with the Khoisan. Sometimes they call them Sosha.
Sosha. Oh, they throat sing.
Yes, and then they have because the Khoisan are the tribe that clicks, and they're the ones who look like the Asian with the Asian eyes. But they're of over thousands of years. When the Bantus migrated to South Africa, the Bantus had a mixture with Khoisan people. So like the mix in between them is like looks like you because you have big frame, but you still have the face of a Khoisan. So Khoisans tend to have smaller frames, but you have a big frame, and then you have the slanted eyes.
Oh, okay. This is
Yeah.
interesting,
So
man.
it's like the old world, like what do you call it? What's in modern terms we call it like Asian eyes or something like that. But
Mm.
yeah, but that's actually like that was very common amongst most humans. Asian eyes was common amongst most humans. I'd say 10,000 BC. That was the common phenotype.
10,000.
Yeah,
Wow.
10,000.
And when you mentioned I'm definitely skipping. I'm gonna bring it back. I'm super interested in this idea because I always wanted to know more about being black as far as where I come from versus what's the difference what's the difference between being black versus being from any part of the planet if everyone came out of Africa.
So you mean Black American, right?
You're right, because there's this
Or
idea that
even in Black in general, I'll say this. Quote unquote, because this labels because we're so complicated, we're so mixed. Even black people in Africa are so mixed. Um, Using skin color, one thing I learned in anthropology class is using skin color to determine race. That's we don't determine race based off skin color. Race is determined based off bone structure, and there's 3 to 4 unique bone structures that determine different types of humans. Um, Now, what we call so-called black, in America, because we have new races now on this planet, um, we have to determine, we stereotype. I'm not stereotype. We categorize based off skin color. But someone who's so-called black and someone who's so-called white could literally have the same DNA, be the same people, but it's just a skin difference. Whereas a tribe in Africa that's opposite from you, just a neighboring tribe, can be completely different because they had a different evolutionary path. Even though you guys share the same skin color, their diet, who they select, who they mate, if I've been isolated for a while and they recently migrated there, they could be completely different people, but we share the same skin color. So when it comes to being a black person in this world, I say especially Black Americans, are the most mixed Black humans in this world. The second most mixed, even though Africa has a lot of tribes, the Bantu expansion, because I'm Bantu, the Bantu expansion also created a lot of admixture between other tribes, and whoever is the strongest and the fittest, gets to survive, and the ones who don't survive, whether it's through assimilation, whether it's through war, or the spoils of war, and all those things, there's a lot of admixture, a lot, even in Africa. So it's actually that's why I like studying history and understanding the bones and all those things, because back then it was more tribalistic. People really stuck to who they were. So it's easy to understand who people were. So being Black American has a lot of admixture from all over the world. Being Africa has a lot of admixture from Africa and the Middle East and Southern Europe, right? And then now you get to India, that's also a whole nother thing. And then you get to, though I think the people with the least admixture are the so-called Black people we call Melanesians, or the Aborigines of Australia, because they've been isolated in islands for a long time, ever since they migrated out of Africa 70,000 years ago, the first out of Africa migration. So they're the ones who I'd say they're more archaic in their DNA and their looks, because they didn't mix with any outside, and they mixed within themselves.
Oh, that's exactly where I'd like to start in. What do you think was the original cradle of humankind, and then where do you think they went off? Like, let's say, like the first, say,
Talk.
Yeah,
That's
original indigenous of Australia.
So obviously, it's that you can trace. I'm looking at. You can trace the migration path, right? You can trace DNA going back with certain tribes that have stayed in certain areas, and how far the DNA goes, linking all the way to that tribe. You can find they find artifacts and things showing the trail that led them to the islands. The Aborigines of Australia share a common DNA with some early Caucasian Australasian tribes that are in south of India. Those tribes, some of the DNA is washed through admixture, but most of those tribes, the Australian Aborigines obviously didn't stay. They created their own path and made it all the way to Australia. But all those tribes, they left. Most of this straight-haired Black people left Africa, East Africa, 70,000 years ago.
Ooh. So yeah. East Africa through no pit stops, like around India.
Obviously, there's pit stops, and then there's tribes that end up staying in certain areas, and then they become their own people, and then they evolve to be something else from what they originally were, while the other ones continue to migrate, and also they continue to evolve because new encounters, weather, diet, isolation, inbreeding, all kinds of different things that
right.
for people looking different from how they originally looked like.
It's deep. This is very deep. There's a lot of directions I can start spanning in. When we talk about, so this obviously there would be like no other people out there. These are just people.
Yeah. Like, so what I'd say is they're Homo sapiens. They're the first Homo sapiens to leave Africa. Yeah, that's my question. First Homo sapiens to leave Africa. And then obviously they by the thick bone structure, the shape of the skull, we call them Melanesians or Austronesians. Obviously, they had some admixture with some archaic being, because that's why I don't like when scientists have figured out. White people like to claim everything. What do you call it? They say the white people are Neanderthals. No, the people with the most Neanderthal admixture. If also Neanderthals had black, smooth skin, though not as hairy as we thought. The people with the most Neanderthal admixture are Melanesians, Black, Southeast Indigenous Asians, and the Aborigines of Australia. They have 6% to 8% DNA archaic, either Neanderthal or Denisovian DNA. So it means how they used to look when they left Africa, and whoever they intermingled with, and whoever other hominid they intermingle with in those islands, kind of changed who they are. That's why they have thicker bones. That's why Samoans, even though Samoans are the pacified version of Melanesians, Samoans have white skin because that mixture, this and that mixture with Chinese and Portuguese and all that. So they're thick bones. Melanesians, Fijians always have thick bones because they're ancestral admixture 170,000 years ago for the first out of African migration. They had mixture with the old archaic beings that had thicker bones. So mixed Homo sapiens with those archaic beings, then you get these people with really thick bones.
Very interesting. So we have Homo sapiens, which you would say originate in the cradle in somewhere in Africa.
Yep.
Particularly not maybe East Africa.
No, I'd say the oldest. Now they just found the oldest Homo sapiens. The cradle, which I thought was East Africa, from. Actually, now it's further south. It's like in between, like Botswana, Malawi over there. They're finding out that so-called Neanderthals. Neanderthals. I remember studying this in schools, but Neanderthals are kind of like mules. Have you heard that Neanderthals? They had trouble. Neanderthal with a Neanderthal had trouble having children together.
Wow, the only way they couldn't reproduce,
like a mule. You know how mules, they mix between a donkey and a horse or whatever. They can't breed when they're together, but they can only breed when the one before breeds with them. So that's why Neanderthals were few in number. So the hypothesis with the black scientists I've been working with, they figured out that the Homo erectus, when you mix with our hypothesis, the Homo erectus, which has been around for 2 million years, when they mix with a Homo sapien, that creates a Neanderthal. So they're bastard child, not a bastard child. They're almost like a Neanderthal is almost like a disabled child of a Homo erectus and Homo sapien. But the reason why but when they mix with when a Neanderthal mix with a Homo sapien, they create a Cro-Magnon. And then when a Cro-Magnon mix with a Homo sapien, they create a Homo sapien. But when Homo sapiens mix with each other, they create Homo sapien sapien. So there's a mystery being. There's a mystery being that is not there's no one knows where Homo sapiens really came from. Like, I mean, how they came about. But one thing is, they didn't come from Neanderthals. That's one thing we have to get straight. Homo sapiens didn't come from Neanderthals, absolutely. But Neanderthal, a lot of them have a lot of them have some Homo sapien DNA.
A lot of Neanderthals have Homo sapien DNA. So, yeah. It looks like before we get to Australia, we have Malawi, which looks like...
Yeah. Okay. So you go up. So the Homo sapiens that mixed and became their own group, they migrated up. You will keep going up. So you go towards Kenya. You go towards the Horn of Kenya there. Right. And also you see where is that Djibouti over there? Djibouti, the country. Djibouti. And then from there's two migration split offs. There's the ones who went crossed through Djibouti to Yemen. And then there's the ones who kept following the Nile all the way up to Egypt. And they spread out to become they become the early Europeans. So the ones who went right through Yemen and stayed south from Djibouti to Yemen continue to go up. And they, I think United Arab Emirates, I see that over there. There's like a pyramid right there, the pyramid shaped part of the map. And you have to understand, back then, 70,000 years ago, the planet kept fluctuating. When there was ice ages, from 70,000 years ago to now, there's probably 4 different ice ages. So the water barriers we're seeing probably most likely had land bridges, so it's easy for people to cross. Yeah, so they making their way to Australia. So right there, United Arab Emirates. Then from United Arab Emirates, they to Iran, the southern part of Iran. And then you're making your way from the southern part of Iran. You're going all the way to India. As you've seen, I know you've seen those old tribes like the Andaman Islands at the south of India and the
Oh,
Andamanese people.
wait, hey, Danny, we pull up Adam and Eve. I almost said Adam and Eve.
and
Adam and Eve.
yeah, and Andaman Islands. Those people have not changed. If you want to know how the first
Oh, wait, now
people
in a
who
different tab though. In a different tab. Let's keep this map.
if you want to know how this people have not, the look has not changed, even though they're black, they're not like black like the modern black person. Those are the people. Those are the one of the oldest races in the world. They left Africa 70. They've been in India before the people we call Indians. They've been in India for over 70,000 years. As you see, they're black, but they don't really look like the modern black person.
I want to back up and look at this concept of Homo sapien and
Mm-hmm.
then Homo erectus. Where
Yes.
where do archaeologists think Homo erectus earliest
Well,
lies?
Homo erectus is the first human looking like upright. If you saw Homo erectus in the past, you'd think it's an African, like some African tribesman. But Homo erectus was the first. They were not Homo sapien because of skull shape still, but they were the first like modern looking. Before Homo sapien came to be, first modern looking hominid because they walked upright. Homo erectus means like upright, upright. They could run for a long amount of time like a human being because Homo sapien has the most stamina, and obviously hairless. They were hairless. They knew from what they've seen from what they've left behind. They knew some form of working with fire. They were not afraid of fire. So Homo erectus came about from Africa about 1.2 million years ago in Africa. And one thing they did not know is their migration route or path to leave Africa. But obviously, there's other hominids that are older than that, and then there's other hominids that are 2, 3 million years old or whatever that you can find outside of Africa and Europe or Asia. But those are the hominids looked most likely like monkeys. But when it comes to modern hairless uh, hominids, Homo erectus are the first one, and they've been in. I think they've been in the planet 1.2, 1.5 million years.
So Homo erectus, and then at some point we've got Homo sapien,
Sapien, yes. And the
and
ones in
then
between, like Neanderthals and Denisovians, um, no one really, it's always a mystery. No one knows where they come from. And that's why the conclusion, if sometimes when it's hard to figure out and you put all the data together, sometimes you have to figure out a lot of hominids, a lot of early hominids were mules, were mixtures between two different complete hominids that somehow created like a mule type hominid race because people back then, they were just banging. This hominids were banging. It's like, hey, that's how they said hi. It's like, hey, how are you? And then bam, they just had sex. So,
wow, just the thought of
so,
having
so
mule-like
people,
humans is very
yes,
interesting. Like they're just so the parents. There, I wonder if there's any modern cultures that had any. But if there were mules, then nobody would. That wouldn't that mean that no one would have any ancestors from them?
yes, that's why Neanderthals died off so quickly.
So why do we
That's
have
why there's
Neanderthal DNA?
so
Why?
it because the only beings that can continue a Neanderthal DNA are Homo sapiens because Homo sapiens are the most advanced form of mammal human, a land mammal human being, the most advanced. We're the most, we're just the most advanced. Our journey to even come to where we are, even our mind, even how our mind works, even how we reason, everything. We're the most advanced. All that happened. That even coming to that about happened in Africa. So yes, the mules. That's what I saw. Like a big, like if you look at the bone traces, you see a big like spurge of like Neanderthals just popping at a certain time. Like I think like 600,000 years ago, they just 600 to. And also this brings up a new thing. Homo sapiens are actually older than we thought, but not Homo sapiens sapiens, but Homo sapiens who would almost look like a Homo erectus, but the early Homo sapiens. They You just see when a big like just Neanderthals just popped out of nowhere. in Europe. They're just popping up, and they came out of nowhere, and then it's like they just vanished quickly. It's like they pop up and then they disappear, then they pop up again and then they disappear.
So that's a couple interesting thoughts. Like I heard within what you said, somehow through the spirit, it sounded like, I mean, that answers the question. You said that Neanderthal would have to connect with
A Homo sapien
sapien,
to
and
continue
that
its
that would explain why so many of us have so little Neanderthal DNA and not
Yep,
a whole lot. And I
exactly.
imagine the same thing happens with horses and mules. There's only a little bit of mule DNA. Okay,
Yep.
so now I wonder where does the Neanderthal come from? If it was a cross between are there any theories?
So we see that Homo erectus left Africa early too. They were in Europe, um, in small numbers. They were all over Europe, and then some also distant cousin of a Homo erectus that's similar to Homo erectus, but was like a dwarf kind of hominid,
Yeah.
a distant cousin. They also when so when but that's a whole nother journey. The Denisovians are still confusing, but Denisovians are found in Russia. Then they're found in the Melanesian islands. They're found. I know you've seen the original Filipinos, the people they call the dwarfs and all those people like the Negritos, the black
Will you look
Negritos.
up Negritos,
Negrito, yeah, the original
Danny?
Filipinos. Or how about this? That if I don't know if Negritos, I don't know if Google will like censor it and not bring it up. But also,
Original Filipino?
okay, I mean you can type in Negritos, but there's many different tribes. There's like the Ayeta tribe. There's here. Let me see.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So what I'm getting so far is we have the Homo erectus, which you said are
Mm-hmm.
hairless.
Yep.
And then that brings me to a very specific question is this whole thing about like nine ether hair, really curly hair versus really straight hair.
Yep.
If the Homo erectus is anything like an ape, I've never seen an ape with curly hair, let alone like my kind of hair,
So
like really long.
Homo erectus was modern too. Here's the thing: was modern because he had curly hair like black people.
So I thought they were okay, hairless, so not a whole lot of hair, like on the
Yes, not a
arms,
whole lot of hair.
not like huge beards,
Yeah.
stomach, legs, and
Yep.
all that. Like
Yep.
so, but it was the like we don't have any monkeys with curly hair, so
Yeah. No, they were modern. They had the Homo erectus
wh-
did.
any idea how we have so many humans with straight hair? Like where would straight hair come from?
And
It,
this will hurt feelings. All right. Scientifically, um, when it comes to because Homo sapiens are we're the most advanced hominid, the most advanced hominid. Peak, we're like peak human with the hair, the bone structure, the tropic limbs, how you digest, how all these different things. I can't really say skin color because every healthy mammal has, or every healthy living animal has melanin. Um, Straight hair from last time, if you find even like Somalis, like distance, even how Somalians have straight hair and all that. That straight hair comes before it comes before admixture of Arabs, so-called what the people call Arabs. Um, Straight hair comes from a form. It's like a form of like homogenized mixing, but depending on who you are, what your bone structure is. So you can have different types of what do they call it, deformities. Some people get blonde hair, like you see those Melanesian people who are stuck in the islands who've mixed each other for so long that the DNA starts to what do you call it? Because there's no other because evolution, what makes humans advance is mixing with other races of humans. Mixing with other tribes, that's what makes you move forward because you're taking the best characters as a Homo sapien. Um, but
makes sense.
when you're stuck in an island and you mix with each other, or when you guys are just landlocked to one area, depending on what type of Homo sapien you are, or what race of black being you are. One of the deformities can be having straight hair, right?
mm,
Um, one of the other deformities can be having blonde hair. We can find the oldest humans. Old human had wide, thick noses, right? The original nose, but a lot of admixture and also diet and not having access to always eating meat all the time instead of vegetables and all these kind of things. Your bone structure changes with your diet and who you who you mix with. So you tend to see like your bones start getting thinner instead of thicker. So like you have the earliest Caucasian phenotype came about, I'd say, 50,000 years ago. I'm not talking about white skin. I'm just saying bone structure phenotype. I'm talking about high cheekbones and thin lips and thin nose. That's a form of regression from the evolution of the wide nose for breathing air so you can get more oxygen to the brain, and also the thick lips. The thick lips, because early Homo erectus was regressed because it had thin lips. But thick lips comes from experimentation. I know science, they say like, oh, the thick lips come from kissing a baby. No, it comes from trying different, using the lips as a form of seeing what's poisonous and what's not. So
mm,
your lips, the nerves, eventually over hundreds of thousands of years, then the lips evolved to be thick, and also the lips also evolved to be thick because of sexual selection, of who you saw. If you saw someone else and that was a form of beauty, imagine in ancient times, you've never seen nothing, you've never seen metal, nothing, you've not even seen stones. But what was found as a form of beauty or form of evolution, seeing who's survival of the fittest, is another person with thick lips. So people with thick lips were always selected, and also probably they're the strongest. Um, so you have that. So that created a peak evolution Homo sapien. But when they mix with each other, in a homogenized way, you start getting like kind of like having a child with the cousin. You get deformities. So with that continuous uh, mixing, you start getting deformities. Like the face starts getting the children's bone when the child is born, the bones are weaker, right? So you start getting a slender skull shape. The Caucasian slender skull shape with a thin nose and then the thin lips, and then that person mixed with another person who's similar to that. So that continues. Then eventually the curly hair for their children becomes straight. So now you have super dark Caucasian phenotype, like the Dravidian Indians, the ones who are in India right now, who are even darker than me and you, super dark, black. They have thin faces,
mm.
thin lips, long noses, and straight hair, but they're darker than us. They still hold the skin color from when they left Africa, but their bone structure changed from wide face to thin face, and also the hair went from curly to straight. So that's a form of regression because they mixed
Mm,
with each other. They didn't mix with any outside people. They mixed with each other.
mm. So when
Now,
you're enclosed,
yeah,
sounds like you're saying inbreeding leads to a thinning of, like, a general pattern
the
of
bones.
thinning
Yeah,
of the
the bones.
bones.
The bones get weak.
Mm.
The hair gets weaker, becoming straight. Yeah.
Wow, that actually seems pretty consistent when you
Hmm.
when you compare Indians with Africans, you do see a thinner bone structure.
Yep.
But though when we get to indigenous Australians and Polynesians, we see generally Samoans,
Yeah. So
Indians look so
Samoans.
similar. It look like three Indians in one, like,
So Samoans are
but really
descendants of
thick.
Melanesians. Polynesians are like a new race because they have the
Mm,
white skin, but they come from Melanesians. Melanesians are the original Pacific Islanders, the black ones. Uh, yeah. So if you look at Fijians, you look at all, that's how Samoans used to look like. Even the old Maori and all that, they all used to look like that. Um, but that mixture with Portuguese, who were the first to sail to those, actually no, that mixture with the Chinese, albino Chinese, and then also a mixture with Portuguese over the years, kind of made them like their own race. But they still have they still have the big bones from that mixture. From me, they still have the big bones from the distant Melanesian past.
so you're saying it's more from mixing than from
Evolution.
inbreeding and
It,
evolving as much,
yeah.
which is interesting
So
because they're appear so similar. I would even say, like, people in India, that subcontinent, they seem to appear like somebody from every corner of the planet. You got people there that look like
Boom.
they could be from Africa. You got people there that look like they can be like really thin Polynesians. You got people there that look like they can be Mexican. You got people there that look like they
Yep.
could be
India
indigenous
second to Africa
Americans,
is the most because Africa has the most different.
Europeans.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
but in
It's
Africa is
India is
so
very complicated,
huge.
but I can explain it all. So
Mm,
the Melanesians also the path migrating there was from Africa was through India. They passed through India, so there's some remnants of their DNA there, but they pretty much the ones who stayed there got washed out. They got exterminated by the tribes that came, but as you can see, their continuation in the islands that they continued going down on. So yeah, to speak of that, now you have different. Now you understand that mixing within creates different phenotypes. So you have some Melanesians, because different humans were leaving Africa, different types of humans were leaving Africa, Homo sapiens, who already were their own different people in Africa, and then when they mixed, when they left, they became their own people. So you have in the Melanesian islands, even though they kind of have like that similar Melanesian look, you'd see some have blonde hair. I know you've seen the Melanesians who have the black skin but blonde hair. That comes from
mm,
admixture because they're different people. You've seen some like the Aborigines who are completely different. They're what we call Australasian, which I think is the earliest form of a Caucasian phenotype. You see, they have straight hair. The Aborigines of Australia, they're dark, have thick noses, all with thick noses, but their hair started becoming straight because of thousands and thousands of years ago of admixture within themselves in the island without any new person coming in. You can see that and this depends, depending on also how people choose their mates, um whether it's
mm.
from warring tribes, whether the community is patrilineal or matrilineal,
Mm.
so we're so complex. History is so complex that leads us to even this complexity that we're in right now. um but yeah, so yeah, a lot of them went extinct. But if you look at the original Aborigines of Australia, they had kinky hair. The original ones that the whites made extinct. Then you have the ones that stayed. The dark ones that are stayed are the ones they've been there for thousands of years too. They've been there for 40,000 years, but also they had their own form of like homogenous mixing that they gained the straight hair. But those
Mm.
Australasian Melanesian people, because they're old world humans with thick noses and thick bones, they didn't develop the small bone structure like the Caucasian did in East Africa with that mixture with themselves in India. So because they're of an older race that left Africa, and also they have a mixture with an archaic being, some type of archaic being that's like Homo erectus along the way. They're able to retain the thick bones and the wide nose, but their hair was straight. That's one of the reasons.
This is
But you
very
look at
interesting pattern when you're mentioning. So we have a few different directions here. We have the one that I was the most familiar with, from my perspective, has always been mixing.
yes,
Like you said, the Black American is that has the most admixture in maybe
the
the
whole world.
world, and
They're like the modern map. They're the
this
modern
this
map.
makes this makes a lot of sense because
Yeah.
I've only known myself to be an Indian, an American Indian, and European, particularly Irish, and then black, which I don't know where it comes from. And most people see the black in me because I would say that I'm likely mostly black, but and I would say from my hair and then my features, but then at the same time, I have so much indigenous blood in me that
Well,
it's
and
so.
and you have to understand and that's evident to what is the strongest and the oldest phenotype. Doesn't matter what it makes you have. The one that's going to stand out most is the curly hair and the thick nose. So it shows you that that's peak Homo sapien, peak Homo
Very,
sapien DNA
it's
wise.
a very interesting perspective though, because it's new for me. I hear these things about dominant traits and all that, and it's hard for me to really buy into it too much because I feel like a lot of that is also psychological. When you look at our culture in America, of like our history in this country has been, when you're black, there was a one drop rule. So if you're
and
anything about you shows yourself to be black. You know, they'll say you're
that's very
black,
ignorant.
but then
Scientifically,
when
that's
you're
ignorant.
Indian, they'll
Hmm.
say that they'll measure a blood quantum, and then that'll go into the politics of who can register with the tribe and then
Yeah.
receive certain legal benefits of, for example, having a bird of prey's feathers
Yeah,
or
that's all to me
politics,
that's
really.
all like that's all like hierarchy systems to determine
Mm,
uh whoever has the biggest weapons and control of culture and all that, they're the ones that get to dictate all those things. But yeah, just scientifically speaking, yeah, Black Americans. Do you have to think about also the first indigenous people, even when they first came to the Americas through South America, through island hopping from Australia, then from Australia to the Tasmanian Islands, and then the Small Shell Islands when during the Ice Age, when the water levels were low, so you could walk islands, and then walking on the edge of Antarctica, the one part of Antarctica, all the way to Point Fuego, the southern part, tip of Chile, and then from the southern part of Chile, populating, spreading north into the northern part of South America. So you have to understand that the first Americans look like Melanesians. They look like Aboriginal Australians. Those are the first Americans. They had dark skin. They were so-called black people. I don't like using the word like black because black people are all the races, literally all the races. So it's
mm,
so-called black people are the earliest form of humans. So when I say black, it's like you're holding it down to just one definition. Being black is not just one thing. Black people are the most diverse race because we're not the same. We're literally not the same all over the world. We share the same skin color, but we're different humans. So
right.
you have Melanesians who came south, Antarctica all the way, island hopped all the way into South America, and then they became their own people with that mixture from other tribes that kept coming that were different from them. So now you have over the years, when those indigenous Melanesian people in South America populating even all the way to North America, you have during the Ice Age. Also, you have the original Europeans before white people came and conquered Western Europe, who are also black. You have like dwarfs. You have croissant-looking people. Sometimes we call them what's the scientific term for the bones they found? The European bones they found in Canada, northern part of Canada. There's a word. Uh, Whatever that person is. So you have those people, Clovis man, they call him the Clovis man. So you have the Clovis
Mm,
so-called man, which is just like a word they use to determine a group of humans. You have Clovis man admixture with the already indigenous Melanesian Americans, and then now that's created a new group of like black people. And then now you have Africans who come to trade, different groups of Africans, not the same type too. You have like West Africans, you have Bantu Africans, all these different you can find, with the trading. They come and they mix with the indigenous Melanesian Black Americans. So that creates a new type of Black American. And then also you have the conquistadors. You look at the Spanish who came. The Spanish were already a mixed people. The Spanish they had white people, they had black people with them. They came with Moors, and then you have those ones later. The Black Europeans and also mixed Europeans come and mix with the people who already mixed with African, Clovis man, and Melanesian different tribes. So you get this like, and then after that, you get African slaves who get brought by the British to mix
mm.
with Black Americans. So it's just a whole. It's just and some variation depending on what region the black person is from America. Some variation might have more admixture of this, another variation might have more admixture with this, another variation of blacks might have more admixture of this. So um it's very complicated, but like I get it, I see it, like I see the patterns, I see how all these things happen, and yeah, it's a very complicated thing.
That's
But
okay though, because we can simplify it with personal experience. So, because
yeah.
my personal experience is definitely looking at it from just being an American and having these mixtures. People would like to
Mhm.
say, "You're black." Okay, from what country?
Mhm.
You're smart. I don't know. And then what is black? Is it a skin color? If you have
Yeah.
it's saying all black people are not melanated people all around the planet, when you
Mhm.
start seeing people in Australia that have more of these thicker features, and
Yep.
then you say, okay, they're not black, but then they say they look more like people from India, but then you got people in India that range so much, but the
Yep.
darkest Indians wouldn't be considered black. So what are you using to consider black? Then they'll say,
Yeah, and that's why I don't like the term black. That they
right,
the term black
very
to
confusing.
call someone black. That the first use of it came from when I think after this is after the the white the so-called white. I don't want to say even because calling someone white, calling someone black.
Exactly.
The so-called white Europeans sacked the black monarchs, and or when they're spying on them, their definitions. That's what we see the term to call because they're saying it from their perspective. That's when they called black people black, but black people didn't really call themselves. You can see sometimes in Egypt they're proud of their skin or whatever, but in general, like through our history, a lot of world history is black history, and I'm not trying to sound like this is not coming from like I don't even like the term Afrocentrist. I'm just speaking
Okay.
facts because even to get to even how this happened to even get to the point where black people are in this world, that's a whole nother topic that I can talk about. But yeah, that's what we see the term to define someone as black. But black people didn't, because it was normal to be black around the world. Black people didn't really have to define themselves as black because everywhere you go, you find a black person.
Right. I would like to integrate some of these perspectives so that I can carry on this conversation in a cohesive, I would say a cohesive direction. When we're talking so far, what I understand is outside of being mixed, my
Mhm.
perspective was you could take black, white, and Asian, and it's weird how two are called colors, and if you call the third one yellow, then it's an insult. But we talk about these
This is just
colors.
bad news.
We talk about these colors, right?
Yeah,
But I was saying you could take black, white, and Asian, and it seems like you could mix these three and get look like similar at least to
yeah,
anything in the planet, but nothing else could mix to look like those three. I mean, you can mix
yeah,
somebody who's uh, like you can mix someone who's European, you can mix someone who's white, and mix them with somebody who's a very dark Asian, like they would consider someone from India. Get someone like Liza Koshy, who
mhm,
people can off bat assume that Liza is black.
yeah,
And it's funny because she's also in Houston, Texas. So if
yeah,
you speak country, all these things get to social media in black,
mhm,
my only way to make sense out of those things would be just the whole one drop perspective in America. If you're
yeah,
dark, but if you're black and white, like Obama, for example, the first black president is still a white man because
yeah,
his mother's white, but we want to ignore that or look at Kamala Harris and say she's Indian and black, but oh, that's a black woman, except now I don't know, she's kind of Indian. It's like we get this perspective of what is black based on the modern media
yeah,
and and just to come back and say there's a lot of people that have more European traits,
mhm,
but because they're brown skin, we're gonna compare them to other people that were black and white that we
yeah,
still call black, so it makes them look white. Like I've also met numbers of people who were very dark, had a very dark Filipino parent, and
yeah,
then the other
yep,
parent was white, and
yeah,
they really were surprised to find. I was surprised to find that they weren't black. I don't have
yeah,
their picture, but
yeah.
Danny was like, "Danny, are you still there?"
Bro, I'm here and I'm intrigued and I'm just like, oh man.
I'm gonna just
What do
pull
you
up.
mean?
I mean, so many people should know who Liza Koshy is by now.
Oh,
Everybody
bro.
isn't gonna assume
Yep.
that she's black or looks black, but
Mhm,
I showed a woman I was working with who was Indian,
mhm,
like American Indian. It's a I'm gonna say, a native, right?
yeah,
And I just showed her this video of Liza, and she was like, "Oh my God, no, it's black girls are so funny. They're just saying this and then she's up in the store." I'm like, she's not black,
yeah,
and she's actually Indian and white,
yeah,
and
that's true.
like I wouldn't want to compare to like you won't likely find anybody who, let's say, like a celebrity. Like it ain't like you can point out she looks like, you can't say she looks like Beyonce. You can't say she looks like Mariah Carey. You can't say she looks like people who are mixed black and white. But in a lot of people's heads, because of how we've been trained, we think,
Bang,
oh, like
yeah.
we
We just pass
assume
off as
because of
black.
her European features, right? Like I said, if you're European and black, you aren't thought of as being European by the common perspective. So that denominator must be, oh, those are black traits, right? And like I have cousins that appear Punjabi,
Yeah,
and some people, I don't think anybody's gonna mistake me to be Punjabi if I like wrap my hair or whatever. But they're from afar, when you see someone that's light, everybody has a different perspective, right? So that's one thing.
if you have the beard and you put on like a turban or whatever, like some hair, so no, I'm messing with you.
But when you meet the people, though, the people have a different perspective, and they'll disagree. Like a lot
Yeah,
of people pull up and think like Samoans, for example, they'll think Samoans look black. But
yeah,
when I'm spending a lot of time getting to know Samoans, I mean, I'll be real, like these Samoans were Bloods, which was a black gang
yeah.
in
I've seen
California.
that they joined a lot of like Bloods and
And
Crips. Yeah,
they did a lot of things that well, a lot of people associate with black culture, like
yeah,
rapping, watching BET in the morning,
mm,
the barbecuing, the family, sometimes scrapping, saying nigga, um,
yeah,
it was a lot. Like, but then when I spent time with them, I realized, you know what though? A lot of us have that perspective because we have a lot of mad mixture. We can look at like Busy Bone, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and
yeah,
he has a lot of admixture, right? You end up getting like like bigger hair,
yeah.
looser, and then you kind of assume, oh, I have an aunt that looks like that, or so. But reality is,
And
none of them have that thick. None of them have them thick features like that, like the bone structure, the hair. Like when you're around Samoans, you can see that there's more of a commonality in features that other black people
exactly
won't
to what I,
have
yes,
exactly like you were
exactly to what
saying,
I
right?
said earlier.
So that broadened my perspective, and it comes back to what you're saying about. So we have the mixing, which is a big deal because you can have like big thick bone structure but still have like straighter hair. But
Yeah,
then you can also have, like you mentioned, the traits, and then as we mentioned, the food, and then the
yep.
climate. And so
Climate,
there's a lot that goes into every individual's family history, because it wouldn't make any sense to say because someone's dark skinned they're black. And then, well, where I come from, it's like we got to remember that sounds like a master slave system that happened in America that said, oh, you can't comb your hair, you're black, or you're dark, you're black.
yeah.
When the world is so huge and we have so many, I mean, I don't know if you talk to Danny or seen Danny, but Danny, you can't come in the camera right now. You don't
Yeah,
need to
I
pull up
saw
the
I saw the
picture.
picture. I saw his
You,
picture.
but like we can also romanticize and project. And I think a lot of the world feels like black people tend to project the blackness onto people who aren't white. Like everybody that isn't white, as if we like to pick and choose
Yeah,
who
so
we want.
yeah, and all of this, all these things, and this thing we call society, because it's always
Mm,
changing. And also even how we use language and give power to words. Man, just how we come to conclusions because we speak organized language, a trade language, and all these things, and
mm,
having even our day to day life of having to get up to go to work and all that. So it creates a lot of confusion and a lot of things, and also how we define people because also the world is very deep and complicated. We have different type of humans, and so we're just trying to be organized and find a way with this language that we call English to define to characterize and define what's in front of us because it's important. It's pattern recognition to have categories to define, which is smart. But just how we're going about it is wrong because we just do not know the whole truth. And even with all the knowledge I know it's like a drop. Um, yeah, so that's why the more I learn the truth, the more I learn history, I'm humbled and I take a step back and I'm less offended by a lot of things because I'm realizing, wow, okay, so now what is what's the purpose of life? Like what's my duty? It's survival. My children. Um,
mm,
yeah, so to because every living life, that's what life is. Life has to survive, and your reward for surviving is procreation. That's why it feels good to have sex because it's like nature is rewarding you for continuing the survival to continue life. Um, so yeah, to get to what I was saying, you mentioned something earlier, about black people rapping and all this. Here's another scientific thing people don't put into, not Afrocentrist, scientific. People don't put this into perspective, but um, it shows you that so-called modern, because there's black people who still, like Melanesians in the Melanesian islands, they still a hunter and gatherer, right? They're still hunter and gatherer. Because black people are many things. There's high IQ blacks, and then there's black people who just no high IQ, but also using the high IQ based on an industrial system of measurement on how you process things as opposed to how you process things in nature. Um, what I'm saying is the so-called modern black or the Bantu black, even how we hold fat on our faces, all this, and how women have big butts, big tits, small waist, all that. That comes from advanced, not only advanced, that comes from advanced culture. That's why the so-called Homo sapien and blacks rhythm dancing, this comes from you being able to have the time for thousands of years, have the time to not be a hunter and gatherer. Means people were farmers, and when you're farming and you're not in a feral state of always wanting to hunt, you start reasoning differently. How you eat, how you set up your society, um, how you choose your mate, how you just everything. So then you have music, I was reading something just about 70,000 years ago. That's when Homo sapiens, the from Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens, that's when the vocal code that elongated. That shows you that people were settled, people were not in a feudal state. People there was a long great peaceful period, and that peaceful period made so-called what we call, I'd like to say, Bantu blacks, even though Bantu, they say Bantus or whatever. They say Bantus came about, what's that stupid thing? They said Bantu migration. Bantus came about 1,000 years ago. No, Bantus have been around. Bantus and Pygmies are distant cousins. The rhythm you're talking about rapping, rhythm, music, creativity, and coming from survival, coming from deeper thought, coming from different reason, coming from deeper feelings that bring up that, coming from what you eat. Even some of them, hell, people ate wild mushrooms. Who know what that made them evolve to be and reason and decisions. But you have this black people right now, so-called black people who have rhythm, because there's dark skin. The Somalis don't have rhythm. Fulanis don't have rhythm. Those Dinka people jump have no rhythm, but the specific, like how Black Americans are, bunches in Africa, they have that rhythm, like of music, of just feeling, being in tune with everything. That comes from that comes from thousands and thousands of years of organized agricultural culture. That comes from that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Comes from being at peace for a long time, that you evolve to be this like higher state of self. So you become like so that's something I just wanted to mention, because you mentioned something about rapping and whatnot. So I got
definitely, because the way that
I got
we feel that. Yeah,
just even like water drumming, all these different things, instruments. They found those instruments in Africa. They found a flute that's the oldest flute in the world, was found in what do you call it? The northern part of South Africa. Can't remember where, but it shows that it was a bone. It was like holes in the bone. But it shows that people like so-called what we call black people, because there are many different types of blacks. It shows that also agriculture like changes who you are in an evolutionary way. If you're savage, you don't stay with us. If you're peaceful, you stay with us over here. You can't have the girl, only this peaceful guy, because now it changes reason. It makes it so that the strongest is not the one who, the physical strongest is not the one who gets the girl. The one who can reason and create a kingdom and come up with plans, who can create, is the one now who can get the mate. So yeah, like all of that brings us to this. You want to know why, people are like, oh, how come black people have so much rhythm and all this, and how come y'all can sing, dance, and blah, 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 blah. It comes from agriculture. It comes from thousands of years of agriculture, sexual selection, and all those different things that lead us to the point of this, for when it comes to rhythm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely, adds to a lot. When I was talking last podcast about people all around the world, and my theory of how each chakra and energy corresponds to a region of the world. That's how I would classify race, just as an angle of
Mhm.
the human soul. We
Yeah.
all have an angle of the human soul, and we spoke a little bit about this. You felt a fiery energy in Africa, but I would say it would be a more energized water energy.
Mm.
Fire, I definitely attribute to the white European. It's
Okay.
very advancing, because we're all speaking the European language right now.
Yeah.
It's very advancing. Fire takes everything further, but if it goes unchecked, it also destroys everything and breaks it
Wow.
all down.
Yeah.
And fire also has a fixation with purification. When you
Mm.
purify something, you call it white, and then
Yeah.
there's a possible agenda of whiting out. There's an
Mhm.
interesting little thing around the whole planet where what the privileged class doesn't work outside and they don't get as dark as the other people. Seems like
Yeah.
in every society, just about the darker people are ostracized. When I went to Mexico for the first time, I forgot all about the really dark brown
That's good. Yeah.
Mexicans that are square, and like there are square Mexicans that are
Yeah.
indigenous. Like the toes are square, the head is square, like everything
Yeah.
is more square.
Yeah.
And then there's a shorter stereotype. And my girlfriend and I try to figure out a little bit about these connections because we talk about some of our tribe similarities
Yeah.
versus like my tribe in Canada versus her tribe and in Mexico, and
Mhm.
how there's some that have this, like they tell each other by their noses, but
Yep.
how the grandma was thinking that the indigenous weren't, don't know where they got this short Indian thing from, and indigenous thing from, because not all of them were short, a lot of them were really
Sure. Yeah.
tall, but then
Exactly.
it's like some are more squarish, right?
Yeah.
Like my girlfriend got some square toes, and I was laughing about that a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit,
So
but
she has that. She has the. She obviously has the distant admixture. I mean, distant. What's that word? Not admixture or
like
admixture. She has the distant. The people you mentioned, the indigenous people of Mexico. You saw.
and I'm wondering, like, okay, why don't we have those square features up here? But either
Mhm.
way, either way, when I went to Mexico, I noticed, wow. So the lighter skinned Mexicans that would be stereotyped in California, is a lot of essays and stuff are
Yeah.
mestizo. These are more Spaniard. But
Yeah.
when you go into deep Mexico, like you start seeing like really brown skin,
Yep.
like Dora the Explorer,
Yeah.
indigenous looking Mexicans, like they move and speak more slowly, intently, and are more tranquil. But ooh, if they
Yes.
get pissed off, it's intense as fuck. It's like all the, so I always attributed that with the light energy of the solar chakra because it's very active. You ever check
Yeah.
out Latino culture? We were talking about this. It's so
Oh, they're
zesty. It's
fiery.
like the flavor is like, but it's like light because it's flashy. It gets your attention. It's colorful. It's like,
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me of a lot of parts of Africa where the dandy
Thank you.
movement foods, but they'd be like super, super. But it's not. I feel like like black people, I feel like have more of a, and I use this term interchangeably because I don't wouldn't know what to say at all. But like Africans and people that'll be like African American, I see the fluidity, but it all seems to revolve around emotion. While like
Yeah.
Latin America, it feels like the culture is a lot more about flash. Like everything is quick. Like
Yes.
get to get saber. It's like everything is like, but then it's like nothing, and nobody's like
Yeah.
staying on it. It's constantly moving like light, right?
Yeah,
And
and that's how it is with
yeah.
East Africans. With I
Okay.
mean, certain part of East Africa. Like that's why I like Spanish culture. But also, I'm here. I've seen the West Coast. When I moved here, I found
Mhm.
myself getting to a lot of altercations with Spanish people, Mexicans. Because both of us we come from proud cultures. We're proud of who you are. You're proud of where you come
Mm.
from. High ego. Like we don't like to be disrespected.
Mhm.
But obviously, I'm past that because I'm reasoning in a different way now. It's childish, but coming from
Mhm.
cultures of just not being, it's like, hey, don't disrespect me. And I noticed, like the Spanish people, like I said, they're very fiery, very the most fiery people. Actually, I thought Africans were fiery from East Africa where I came. It's like there's this culture of like no disrespect because disrespect can really, no, that's a no where I'm from. But I came here and I was like, wow, these Mexicans take it to a whole nother level. Like,
What's funny is when you go to the more like the indigenous Mexicans,
yeah,
they have a different vibe. It's not as fiery, but it's
yeah,
more of like a tranquil, like I mentioned, like a slower, steady speaking form.
So is it like what we said, like they're on island time?
I
Like
don't know if I could compare it to island time. I haven't been to the islands like that. I've been in Jamaica, but I
so
wouldn't be
that's what
compared to
island
like,
time is. It's like where people
like
just like move
Hawaii or
slow. It's like they're
Samoa.
just coasting through, but it
They
makes it
they
work.
they they're a lot more tranquil
Mm,
until they get pissed off, and that's my best way to describe it. But when I
okay.
went down there in Mexico, I
Mm,
saw that the lighter skinned Mexicans in general, like the vast majority, if not, I don't want to say all the ones I saw, but
mm,
in my memory is fuzzy. It looked like all the ones I saw that were light skinned had houses, cars, and went to work and stuff. And then like the
yeah,
really dark, like indigenous ones were on the street with blankets selling
yeah,
dolls and
yeah,
bracelets. Like I go out and sell, like they're out there. So I'm looking at this like this is an indigenous practice, and a lot of them would be ashamed of being indigenous. They're ashamed of it. Even like
yeah.
ones I'll meet,
It's
they'll say
unfortunate,
they're not indigenous. They say no, they're not. They're not indigenous. But I'm saying Mexico is America, and this is not
Yeah,
Europe. So how can you
and
be
and
European and
and
we're
that's
here?
and that's a product of. It's unfortunate. That's a you know
That is.
there's good things about a industrious type of society, industrialization, where you're and where you're worth, but also those are the bad things of it, because genetically we're different, and even in Africa, being Bantu and all that, even Egypt, we how do you bring value to a society? In ancient times, it's a lot of societies was what can you contribute? Today in an industrial society, your own self worth and your value is based off how much currency you make. So now you're and then infrastructure and access to vehicles, technology on roads, buildings, homes, having access to parts to build these homes gives you an advantage to where you live less like a hunter and gatherer, and more so like a civilized person, because you know how to operate the system that's different, this way of life that's different than someone who would operate in a system where it's a communal based system where people share with each other and they build and all that. So it's like two different civilizations sharing one planet, two different ways of life sharing one planet, and you're left behind because your society has been broken apart, crumbled. People fall for the desires of the industrial system instead of you developing your own, coming up with your own sciences to develop. And that's why that's why you need male leadership. You need people who can like male leadership, like to build, not like overall, but just male leadership to build for your people. So it leaves that, we're in an industrial society. The people who live in industrials where the people who control the industries where literally becoming their own breakaway civilization. And while the people have nots, where the have nots are pretty much getting left to be like pretty much like your own race of like Neanderthals almost, that can reproduce, because you don't have access to all these things, these industrious technologies that so-called give you a life that's less. It's true. Rich people people with access to all these things have a more enlightened life. It's a fact, because you don't you don't have to live life in the way of surviving. So when you talk about that, that's all around the world, even in Africa. There's the haves and have-nots, and yeah, that shit makes me sad, because I know why people. It's hard. I know why it's hard for people to adjust to this way of life, is because you still have that like in you, that DNA of like quilt making clothes, and the only way they can do it is to sell on the side of the road, because it's hard for them to adjust in this
Mm.
society that's this industrial society that's run by certain type of people. So yeah, when
I
I
would
hear when I hear
say,
that, it's sad.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
I appreciate you sharing that and you feeling that and tapping into that information, because it opens up my mind even more to why I make a living like this.
mm-hmm.
I make a living, I like to do podcasts too, because I do have that as well, but it also explains my family. My
Yeah,
mom's side of the family is definitely more on that industrial side, and that sounds like it comes from that perspective. 'Cause you're definitely gonna be less natural as a human when you
yeah,
evolve into, like, it sounds like you're saying sexual selection drives the evolution towards a bit
yeah,
of an unnatural direction as well, so that people can live more comforting lives. And yet we're
yeah,
finding more and more information today that shows how shopping at Lululemon, and getting these leggings with the polyester is bad for your genitalia. I mean, what the polyphenols and the phthalates are terrible for your testosterone, shrinking your balls. It's like
Yes.
everything would like to be heading in a more masculine direction, but all the plastic of comforts in society are
Yeah.
actually diminishing the man in humanity.
Yep.
And then when we get to the, and it's crazy, right? So I have to avoid all that. I'm walking 10 miles a day. I get plenty of sunlight. The stuff that
Good.
people want to run away from in comfort, I'm
Yeah.
choosing to find a balance between the comfort and the purpose so
Yeah.
that we're living and evolving in a certain way, kind of like the way that our admixtures and healthy lifestyle dictate. Because having darker skin and thicker bones and all that, people may like to, and power may have liked to make fun of these things with Sambo characteristics, blackface during Jim Crow, and all around the world. Like when I went to Mexico and I saw how, like, even this one Mexican girl was telling me, you see, like, we're not all short and brown. And I'm thinking, like, what's wrong with being short and brown?
Yeah.
But it's
We
like
have
this
to.
idea of beauty standards, like having thinner bones, thinner hair, straighter hair, all these things. It's like I can see people liking these qualities. Because I mean, it sounds crazy. It's kind of funny, but I actually know a lot of black women that would, and I mean African black women as well, that would love to be with an Asian man. And a lot of people just aren't talking about it and accepting it because they
Yeah.
like the super silky, straight hair. They
Yeah.
like that. They like it. I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm
Me
just
too.
saying
Like. Yeah.
sexual selection, sexual selection.
Yeah.
And everybody has like cultural gravity towards certain features.
Yeah, and that's why I don't get caught up in this. Like, oh, you're a coon if you're like all this and blah blah. But it's like, bro, like there's already each race already has hundreds of millions of people of their race around the world. So like, yeah, you're like getting mad about this. People are gonna choose who they're gonna choose, and people are gonna So people will continue being black. People will be mixed. So the world we live it. We're globalized. We're a whole globalized world. So that shit doesn't. So when people are like, "Oh my God, this African girls are choosing this," aren't you gonna be like, you're already putting like a mental prison on yourself? like you want to like have a peaceful mind in this earth. Hey, come,
especially a
yeah,
especially a beautiful heart too, man. Because some of these kids be coming out a little bit too cocky, man. Talking about, I'm saying you got a woman with the African booty, the African beauty, but then get like the Asian silkiness, and then you got bitches getting jealous. They turn them into jealous, just jealous. Like they drop their ladyhood, but everybody, we can't just be so caught up. We can't be
yeah,
so
like
caught
all
up
this,
in.
like I said, like as I'm getting older, I'm valuing peace. Peace is everything, man. Peace of mind. And all these things and all this like things you're putting saying you can't do this and that, it's just that's a mental prison, man. It really is. You lose your mind trying to like uphold all these expectations for no fucking reason. um yeah, so that's when it comes to that, that's what I'm gonna say, because the world is already complicated. We're already here, we are, and we're just trying to find balance of peace and seek the truth. Sometimes truth changes based on perspective, but also hard truth backed by physical things, and then whatever conclusion come to with what we find, that's what I guess we'll call truth. So peace and that, I think that's what people should peace of mind, and then truth of history and where we are as people. I think that's something that can make the world a better place with no shame, nothing, without feeling offended or whatever, or everybody can be high IQ, everybody can be low IQ, So yeah, man, like peace of mind and the truth. I believe humans should strive for that. I think it will really make the place a better place. But we're a globalized world. Everybody has different opinions. We can fly airplanes, can go to different places, meet different cultures, and we can come to conclusions peacefully that creates a certain type of society. But still, it's not from what you know. So yeah, it's a complicated world, and like you said, all those things about the chakras and all that, just finding inner peace and the truth. That's what I believe in. Like I'm even rambling right now, but
I feel like you're sharing though. Sharing is important. Sharing is
Thank
caring.
you.
We need to feel each other as well as hear each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, man. That's why. I mean, that's where I'm at. That's what I believe. And um, yeah, man. I have a lot of answers. There's a lot of stuff I've researched though. Like when it comes to human history, a lot of stuff I've researched, and just to understand. Like I believe I have a good grasp of understanding where we are right now.
What got you into archaeology, into all of this?
Well, okay, so this is a funny. So first of all, my dad's my hero. He's a science guy. He did biology, chemistry. So I was into science. In Africa, I loved animals, biology, all those things. And then also I was like, what? Like I remember I took a course in Kenya, primary school, and I was learning about like, they're teaching us about like evolution in this class I was learning. And I learned about like I was like, whoa, you mean like early humans used to have feet that had thumbs, like the big toes of thumb, and that like intrigued me. And then I kind of like forgot about it, whatever. Then I came to America. And I don't like this path because it's like a revenge, whatever. When I moved to America, with my science knowledge, everything, I at first like I experienced racism here, and I wanted to prove people wrong scientifically. And then I took anthropology in high school, then I took anthropology in college. And in turn, that hate left a while ago because my curiosity, like, just wanted to learn more. With my curiosity, it just made me like find new things that completely like changed I was like, whoa, okay, so this how the world, okay. Because I'm thinking a lot. I think a lot. I think about a lot of things at the same time. Sometimes I say I'm like Kanye West. It's hard for me to put it into like an organized form and sentence with this language we call English. But I'm thinking about this shit at the same time. Yeah, so anthropology in college, and it turned to a love of just wanting to know, just wanted to know where I stand in this world and who I am. It's a continuous journey. I found through learning anthropology and history and all this is helping me better understand who I am and where I stand in this world as a person. Um, and yeah, so I got to college, and it's funny. He's a Southeast Asian instructor. Like after class, he's like, "Man, you're good at this." He put me out of class, and he's like, "I wanted to tell you something." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Did you know the first people in my country, in the Philippines? Did you know they're black?" I was like, "What? What do you mean black?" He's, "Yeah, they have hair like you and they have black skin." Blah 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 blah. I was like, "Wow, okay." Then that intrigued me more in my journey of anthropology and understanding the truth. Now I got a job in the airline with all this knowledge of anthropology, and I was working in the airlines, and here and there would like roast each other and talk about history and talk about evolution science. And then this Samoan guy, it's a Samoan guy too, which is really freaking funny. He this what like made my journey even just with my real scientific knowledge that I learned in college and all these things, but not the deeper stuff where you have to go to universities with books that they hide from that you have to pay and study. He introduced me to a website called realhistorywww.com. And that website just took everything to another level because they have sources. If you think like this is not true, there's sources and links to scientific research, links of real scientific experiments and research done, and like restoration of certain things, and whether it's through genealogy, whether it's through carbon dating, whether everything you can think of. Yeah, that's the site. That's the site someone showed me in 2015, a Samoan guy. He showed me that website, and that website just took off, took me everywhere. It confirmed, that website confirmed a lot of conclusions I came to myself when I was younger. And I just to let you know, some people can get offended when they read the website. Even though it's fact based, it they call non-black people albinos, and there's a thing you can read of how they came to that conclusion, which is actually scientific fact. But outside of that, they have a lot of good sources on everything you need to know, every link. everything you need to know, that website. And then also there's another website now that I'm another group chat called egyptsearch.com, similar. I don't have an account, but now there's Twitter groups that I'm in where people talk about scientific backed things, and it's just it's so now my journey, all of this is just trying to understand how the world works. I'm a curious guy. I want to know how the world works, what got us to this point where we are right now. I like to know who I am, because that's always changing. It gives me peace to kind of like research these things, because it helps me understand who I am and where I am as a person, and also helps me to figure out what I want to strive for. So yeah, this is all what I can say is, with this experience, it's just a journey for me. It is, and it's a journey that I'm appreciative, because it fuels my curiosity, because I'm always learning new things. Now that I'm learning these new things, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it as a person, right? So first, just continue to. I think it's continuous to continue to strive for inner peace, and continue to get rid of these mental blocks that I have, get rid of shame, get rid of all these things, and I am right now talking to y'all.
Really good, man. I appreciate you sharing those links too, and that backstory, because your information is clear and concise. When I met you, so I'm glad that we were able to have you on here. There's a couple of topics I want to get into with you. I want to start off with European. Like, where do you think Europeans came from? And before you answer the question, I want to give in my chime on like when I think of like the Celts, who
the Celts were black people. I'll tell you the Europeans,
right.
European, where they come from.
This is I want to point out some things I've noticed, right? That makes a lot of sense. Like the stereotypical red hair, freckles,
that's black people.
thicker skin. Yeah, like
there's people in Nigeria. There's certain tribes in Nigeria with ethnic
5% black, right? Like they won't even be Celtic. They'll be 75% like something very white, like Scandinavian, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah.
And then, but their grandmother or their grandfather, I've met this on different occasions, they were black, like African black, something like they weren't like known to be like super mixed, just like really black. And so they're 75% white, 25% black. And tell me why they look like a regular white person, but they got curly red hair with freckles.
Yeah, I can explain that. That's like, just the redheads. That's a very obvious distant admixture with the indigenous black people of Europe. That's simply put. That's all it is. Different admixtures, because it's a specific type of black people that the so-called whites mixed with to have that distant red hair. Other whites have black ancestry, but they don't have the red hair, because another type of black another type of black, doesn't cause the red hair. But even in Africa, because no other race can create blacks, but black people can literally, like, if you give me a certain type of black people, I can create other races. Like I can have I can create a project and say, if this person has a child with this person and the baby comes out to this, make sure this baby mixes with this person until it fine tunes into that specific race. I can put it together, but I'll probably be long dead. And it'll be like 200 years when the conclusion I came to comes to fruition. You have tribes in Nigeria and in Africa where someone, fully black, like black parents and everything, and no different admixture of white people, whatever. They'll be born with a little bit lighter skin and red hair. You have that all over Africa. You have people who have blue eyes, which is another form. Now, let me talk to you about where white people come from. So so-called Caucasians, white people, are literally remember the Dravidians. Remember the Dravidian black Indians I told you about, who the first Caucasians who left Africa to go to India. Then because they mixed with each other, the bottlenecked. It was like a bottleneck admixture. They retained the black skin. They still retained the black skin, but the hair became straight, the bones, the skull became thinner, and then the lips became thinner with the long nose. They have Dravidian Indians and Pakistani Indians, the black ones with straight hair, have the highest amount of albinos in the whole world. The whole world, they produce the most albinos. So
in ancient times, if you're different, in Tanzania, the Tanzania treatment where when people see albinos, they think like they just go kill them and use their body parts as rituals. So albinos have to be hidden to be safe from all that danger. So I'll admit, black people were the original racists of the world. They were. In ancient times, when you're albino, the people just come club you to death, kill you. So in India, these albinos, because they're obviously you care about your children. Your child is born albino and you want to hide them from the general population. They were often sent off. And also albinos, they because the sunlight burns their skin and everything. They can't stay in hot areas and all this. They can't deal with it. So, and you can't take them to too much of a cold area too. You can't take them to super cold areas because they can die too. You have to take them to a climate like the state of Washington, which is perfect, right? It's cloudy. The UV rays don't burn you as much because there's lots of greenery. There's no reflection off of the snow to burn your skin, or there's no reflection of the sunlight burning you. So you take them to like a place like this, a grassland, a wet grassland, and it's cloudy and it's not too hot, not too cold. So you have Dravidian Indians moving their albino offspring en masse to protect them from the dark Indians when they kill them. And this thousands years ago, they move them up to the region like Caucasus Mountain region, the country Georgia. That's like a perfect climate. Georgia is like Washington. And they're kind of like left there to be their own people. When an albino has a child with an albino, the baby will be albino. That's a fact. So they reproduced and they became their own people, pretty much, their own race. And they're first mentioned, I think the oldest, the first mention of so-called Caucasian white people, albinos, is the Yamha people or something like that, and the Point Steep. But the more detailed, because I think the original Romans were dark. They're dark. They're the ones who mentioned they're the ones who mentioned the earliest mention of so-called white people. They had obviously when albinos mix, they have red hair and blue eyes. So the earliest form of white people is mentioned white people with red hair. They said their skin is very fair and their hair is red, but they have fierce blue eyes. That's first mentioned. But the detailed one is the Aryan. The Aryan one is the second oldest mention of so-called Caucasians. They're the ones who came from the north. They wanted to get revenge, right? They grew in numbers. And also growing, who knows what type of life they were living there, because they were left, they were ostracized from society. They grew in numbers to be millions. And also because they're already deformed and they're already albino and they're reproducing with each other. And then also you regress. You come from high culture, you're albino, but now you regress to a lost form. There's cannibalism. There's all kinds of things because there's no form of infrastructure. So everything you build is off of wood and all that. So you build a hate for the people who put you in that position. So you have the Aryans who migrated south into India, and the story even talks about it. That there's a book that talks about how they defeated the black ones and expelled them further south. And then that's why you have the northern part of India, the Sikhs who are lighter or whatever, then the middle part of India, which is brown, then the southern part, which is dark. The whole India used to be dark. So that's so white people, so-called white people, are just albino Dravidians who are in Georgia. Now, that's the first wave. There's three waves of Caucasians. The last wave is a thing called the Great Migration. The Great Migration, which was fueled by the Huns and Genghis Khan. First by the Huns. The Huns had many wars with so-called white people, and also those white people having wars with the Huns and the Mongolians. All this, they turned the so-called Asian black. I mean, they turned so-called black Asian white, because of all that mixture they had with them. But the Huns ended up getting revenge and kicking the so-called white Caucasians butt. And then the Great Migration happened, and the Caucasians end up moving west into Europe. You move west into Europe, there's black people, the indigenous black people there, but they're not, they're not aligned. They all have different clans. They're all different, they differ from each other. So, they're easy people to conquer because they're not together. White people were banding together under the guise of skin color because they're ostracized. So that's a common thing to come together about from everybody different from them, which is skin color. Black people didn't have that problem. Black people were, because they're the original people, they didn't have to come together based off skin color. So you have a mass migration. you have a mass migration of barbarian Caucasians who are getting their asses kicked in the East because white people, the original Caucasian, the oldest mummy of white people are actually found in Western China. So you have them migrating west, and they just completely obliterate the blacks who are the indigenous blacks who are staying there, right? In Germany, in France, all that, completely obliterate them, in Denmark. And then obviously, because they obliterate them, they gain some admixture by mixing with them, right? Because the first Caucasians were small, right? I mean, you see how Indians are, they're frail, but they gain admixture by mixing with them, and then they have mixed babies, right? Like a biracial child. And then those biracial child have by default, they have to admix with the whites because the whites are more powerful. So now the whites have assimilated that black strong DNA with already the big numbers they have. And then now that's why you see the Germanic white and the Slavic white look different from each other. The Western European white has more black. That's why you see they have more. They have the R DNA, the haplogroup R, which is actually an African origin. That they have that more in common with the Africans than they do with the Slavic people because they had mixture with the indigenous blacks. The oldest R haplogroup comes from Cameroon, Africa, Cameroon, Nigeria. That's the oldest variation of haplogroup R. Then you see it all over Europe because they're the ones who dominated Europe until the Yamha people came there. So you have admixture, and then you see white people start getting taller, bigger bone structure, because that mixture with the smaller numbers, haplogroup R black people, and then it's just and now and this came about. This is recent. This is like 1,200 years ago. And then you start seeing them taking over because they were just sacked because they're large in numbers and were uniting under the guise of skin color. You see them sacking all the civilizations. They sacked Rome. You hear about barbarians sacking Rome. They sacked, the Holy Roman Empire can only hold on for so long. They sacked them, which are the black people. And they assimilated all these positions of power and took all these technologies, and here we are today. And sometimes even the powerful kings, the black kings, were forced to marry the whites to pass off the wealth to the white barbarians. Even the black ruling class tried to civilize them by giving them religion. And then when they learned the religion, Christianity and all that, they used Christianity as a way to revenge in Western Europe to rebel against the Holy Roman Catholic. If you hear about they talk about the 30-year war. The 30-year war, when the world changed from the so-called First World Industrial World, changed from monarchs to this system of having presidents and countries. The last stronghold was in Europe called the 30-year war, and the black ruling. That's when the black ruling class. This is before the Moors. Actually, no. This is after them. This is after the Moors because they expelled them, but. That's when you see them start to, that's when the world changed, especially in the 1700s, that 1700s. Then you see, after that, there's mass slavery of black people. All it was is black people were just prisoners of war. That's all. It's not like so-called black people. They're just prisoners of war. It's not like, this thing of like, racism is just a tool used to validate. So right now, we're just in this mental whatever. So so you have white people that led them up to where they are right now. They have all this. They have the system of now stealing in a sophisticated way. You have to steal in a sophisticated way, but like institutionalize it. And it's a whole industry. So whatever, because how black people create and who we are as people, it's like we create, but like we share. Like we don't do this thing of like we're like hiding to like one up. A lot of there were black populations that did that. There were black ruling classes that did that, monarchs. But in general, like they create just how the working class general black person did things. So white people, they set up. They're smart enough. They even hijack. In ancient times, black people, we had secret societies and like Kemetic schools and all that, but that was for inner knowledge, But the white people figured out all that knowledge. They kidnapped Egyptian priests and all those things, and and this knowledge is passed down through families, black powerful families, also black powerful families that ended up mating, the offspring mating and turning white. You can't dictate who your children's going to have children with, but a lot of our Holy Roman Empire families were black people, but their children throughout the years ended up mating with someone who's not black, and then they turned white. So now they have access to this. And also, white people know they're not the same. The elite whites know they're not the same because they know their ancestry. They know their black ancestry. The general white population doesn't. They don't know, but the elite whites know their black ancestry. That's why they have access to all this secret knowledge. Yeah, so you have, they use the secret societies for staying in power instead of yes, they use it for two things. They use it how we used to use it for inner peace, but they also use it for staying in power. And secret societies was because blacks were populous around the world. How do you sack powerful black people is by infiltrating them and also learning the secret knowledge and all this kind of thing. So you have, they started their own form of secret societies. They infiltrated the lodges and all these things, masonry. You start learning the secret ways of architecture. How do you build these churches? How do you do this? All this mathematical knowledge. So they used that. And then also they sacked the Holy Roman Empire, the popes, and also, it's just a highly coordinated web of bringing down black people, and also forceful marriages and inheritance and all those kind of things. So all this coordination was planned in the secret societies, and it was like they planned it for it to work the way it is up to now for 1,000 years. So people thought of and they calculated that the world would be this way 1,000 years ago if they took all the right steps so their ancestors, so their descendants can live the way they're living right now. So yeah, just secret societies and all these things that led us to that led black people to where they are in this position right now.
I was gonna say it's definitely a reflection of the macro and the micro of the human soul to the collective soul. I see it. Was analyzing all these cultures around the world and noticing there's way too many commonalities of chakras and energy of each energy placed in the whole planet. And yet I wonder, is it just a direct evolution of our individual spiritual growth seen on the macro scale, to where each individual's life is because I speak a lot about synchronicity and reflection of our spiritual lessons as individuals. And when you mention that this would be done, I can see that as what I call the collective shadow, which correlates with the midlife crisis. The midlife crisis honestly happens actually later, like maybe around like 50, 60. But
because this industrial system, you're forced to
because a lot of us we try to handle that stuff before it's a problem, right? So that's why I like to get into the persona, which deals with how we handle our collective shadow. Is how we handle the stressors of life. So the persona, I've talked in previous podcasts about how we how we use our functions. I would say the best persona to develop would be the superego, which uses your bottom two functions, your last two functions, in a very humble way to understand how we handle those stresses of society, because this is where we get into our individual perspective, our race, our culture, our family history, our individual background, which gives us these pressures into our biases, as well as how we should do. Would definitely suggest muting on that side. But definitely looking at our superego would be a great persona, and then diving back into our higher functions and how we utilize our connection to anything. As I mentioned, each race is just a section of the planet. And as the planets are sectioned off, we're really looking at sections of our soul. So how you feel about white people may very well reflect how you feel about your root chakra, fire, in general.
And also that's and racism also, like, as a tool. I'm sorry to steal your thunder. You can continue. I just wanted to add that racism is another, like, being racist is another mental prison. Like, you're already putting a lot of roadblocks for yourself to that doesn't let you get ahead in finding yourself and peace and all that. That's all I just wanted to add.
Exactly. When you're dealing with these energies, right? You mentioned how these were elite people who set up this system for the entire world to be the way it is. Well,
they stole the system that elite blacks had.
So if we analyze the system from a whole perspective, though, regardless of the race or energy being present, all energies will relate and be used. They won't replace another energy, but they can be integrated in the entire system. I mentioned integration versus assimilation because integration, everything forms a specific function like organs in a body, but then assimilation puts everything, it breaks it all down and then makes it under one thing. But everything cannot fit under fire. Everything cannot be purified as just fire. That's what I would call the uncreation, which is I would say the spirit of self-destruction, where any energy in any race could deal with. But I would like to mention the purpose of, let's say, this level of corruption. When we're dealing with corruption on all levels of making everybody focus on race or making everybody focus on one genotype, like even the people who live more comfortable lives, you might see these people that if you ever find yourself shopping at outlets and you like to be around people where you have a very comfortable life, you make a lot of money. If you get caught into their world, when you're chasing the money, you'll find yourself living a soulless existence. You'll find yourself living in a very fancy prison in a way. It's like nothing feels as joyful. Everything feels under control. And this doesn't have to be about race. As we mentioned, if you live a life where you're so comfortable, where, like I mentioned, Lululemon, like if you're wearing polyester and, you're eating out. Most places you eat out, most restaurants are giving you seed oils. They're giving you like over a high, I forgot what they're called, hydrogenated oils. These are terrible for your entire system. And you might be living a privileged life, but health will be declining. You're being manipulated by something even more powerful than your money, which puts you into a position to support their agenda. So when we talk about they and them and their world, it can look to most people like the white world, the white culture, the white system. But in reality, it has nothing to do with race, but it has everything to do with the spirit. And if the spirit can use, I would honestly say that white people are probably a sacrificial, what do you call it? Like a target, like
I've come to that conclusion.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the word I'm looking for? Like, there's a word for it where you're the target to make it look like you're the problem.
So people don't fight amongst each other.
Sacrificial lamb?
Yeah, something like a lamb, but there's a word for it. I don't know if it was like a ploy or something, but it's a distraction.
White people, like, if there's no white,
for everybody to think it's you doing it when you're not.
When it's
scapegoat.
I was going to say that.
You're being used like a scapegoat, maybe.
A scapegoat.
Like maybe it's
I don't like the shit of like blaming, white people. I like that they're in this planet because maybe this is God's way of teaching us a way to not to because we left his ways, man, and like we need to like really like get our shit together. I was gonna say like when I say like elite people, when they live their own civilization, these people do all the things we're talking about. They eat the healthiest foods. They go live a secret. They practice hunter and gatherer lifestyles so they can be healthy, testosterone. They do all these esoteric things. So the ones we see publicly, the public rich people, those are the ones who are poisoning themselves. We're talking about, but the 1% of the ruling class that no one knows about, and even the type of knowledge, even how they teach the children, their personal teachers, all this thing, they live a life we cannot even comprehend. They live a rich life that were ancestors that was accessible to every human who lived in a society that was in sync together, high function. Like I'd say, like ancient Kemet, when it was at its peak. That's how the elites, like, heck, even me and my dad were joking. We're saying, what if the elites, what if they didn't even speak English? What if they spoke our Bantu languages to each other? Because, English is limited, and even how your jaw moves and your lips move when you speak English to us, especially me, it hurts it feels like you're getting a headache because it's not like connecting to it's not connecting to your inner voice. It's like just out of sync.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the elites. The elites live their own civilization. You do not know if they're black, white, who knows what the fuck they are, but they live such a fruitful life. And the evil thing is that they want to create chaos here so people can stay down, so they can stay at the top. Even the so-called rich people we publicly see, even Elon Musk and all that, even though he has access to all these things, he still hasn't have the access of the bloodline families that are above him that are above money, that make decisions and have knowledge to certain things and certain reactions to certain things and how things happen in certain ways. So yeah, they live such a life. You know, they go visit villages in Africa and they camp out with the villagers so they can understand like what it's like to live that point of view. Like they do all this, they put themselves through certain tests, even graduation tests that they can die. Like an elite father might put his son through something that he might die from. Then he'll be like, I just have another son here who could go. And if my son graduates through this, then he's worthy of inheritance of this, you know. So, you know, they live through, they live such an elite life. And everything they do is just high, like it's just like it's extreme in a good and bad way for them, right? So not to speak of this, not to speak of white people sacking black people to get the topic. This is just revenge on our actions. I call it the Tanzania treatment. Even Tanzania, even today in Africa, we still kill albinos. That's a thing that's existed. Africans have been killing albinos for thousands of years. Right? Yeah, so this is just a way to, you know, our children are this is karma. It really is karma coming back to black people. Literally is.
That is exactly why I mentioned that spirit. Even if you were an elite individual, if you're living a life without love and you're involving yourselves in dark magic practices or in dark science and, you know, dumbing down the world, I've realized that history is a subjective experience that is always, when I went to Canada, it became very clear to me that history is different in every country. So we don't get taught the same history. We all think that somebody's making I grew up with this perspective of thinking something happened. And then generally a white guy happens to be white oftentimes comes up and tells me, no, that's not how it happened. This is what happened. I don't know where you got that from, but this. And I've always had trouble with history unless I could go to a place, experience and reflect on what exists today and test it. And that's why now I'm at this perspective where I would much rather have world history from many people come and compare information and build it and not devolve into a competition of history is whose agenda, and everybody has an individual agenda and lesson, but we won't really be able to get the whole truth if we don't cooperate, which is, you know, we have to approach the shadow from the light. So when I'm mentioning, you know, like the elite or, you know, cultures and like you mentioned, you know, like if I was perceived as an albino somewhere because of just my skin, I would, you know, I clearly wouldn't benefit from that area versus if I'm somewhere, it's like everybody has a different test on where they go, right? So I would ultimately like to say, you know, this is very interesting. So you mentioned like the white people and I'm very interested when you mentioned the kosha, because from what I understand, there's three main cultures in the world that practice throat singing, and I wanted to understand where you think indigenous Americans came from. With my understanding that what they call Mongolian throat singing, we do have certain cultural connections with Siberians that we do, and, you know. Yeah, and that's where my tribe comes from. The Siksika are in Canada, though we have an Algonquin language, so that's more around the East Coast, Vermont. Then I've heard stories of following the buffalo, and that's how we get a lot of our migration, and that's why our reservations are more, you know, over in the Great Plains areas. But I'd like to understand some of these because there's the Kosha also practice throat singing. Also, the Siberians, and I guess it's like Mongolians as well, but then there's also indigenous tribes in Canada and Alaska that do throat singing. So, and so I wanted to see if you knew a little bit of a connection in there.
And when it pertains to throat singing, I wouldn't know. I would categorize under. So here's my theory, and there's evidence to suggest this. If Homo sapiens have been around, I'd say Homo sapiens have been around. Okay, Homo sapiens, the modern agricultural Homo sapien, not the hunter and gatherer Homo sapien that came about 400,000 years ago, but the modern Homo sapien that came about 70,000 years ago. Even 70,000 years ago, civilizations have arose and fell many times. whether it's through war, whether it's through cataclysm, whether it's through starvation. And who knows, materials get washed away. The earth dissolves the materials, whatever you use, whether you got clothes, even metal gets eaten up by earth. So it's hard to tell what left behind. But what I can say is, based on what doesn't get washed away is stone monuments. And when I see the similarities, whether it's America, Africa, Asia, India, China, with the pyramids and all these things and megaliths, it tells me that there was once a global civilization like today, where it was globalized, where people traded with each other on a global level and had influence of culture. So now to come to what you said, yes, I believe due to that globalization in the past, or migrations, or this and continued culture, because back then, people had longer memories. There was no screens. There was nothing. We're not staying in houses most of the time, and you're active, so your brain was functioning at a higher level. So yeah, and then oral history, and also people recorded. I'd say people recorded history very well back then, and especially oral history and how it got passed down. I believe that. I believe that, and based on how people are higher functioning because they're just more physically active, I believe that, and all the thing I said prior to that is the reason why you'd find all the similarities of this kind of things in different parts of the world.
Okay, because I definitely see us all as one huge reflection, and yet understanding some of the ties with that connection. Maybe it's a bit of a puzzle. Maybe it's a puzzle. I don't think it should highlight what cultural interests I take and grow. As long as it works, I'd like to learn it and grow with it, and it should be preserved.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely curious because I hear so many different, like there's a narrative that a lot of white people will say that Christopher Columbus came, and then I mean, I grew up with that Thanksgiving story, and so even though I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, I do believe in giving thanks and having, every time I eat, really, but if you're going to share meals, and especially, you can also take it back and educate people on like some histories, but then we should also be able to move forward and live with each other and continue instead of being stuck in the past. So I believe there's value in the past as well, as long as it exists today. But I'm hearing different accountabilities. Like there are people that tell me that, so being a red Indian, like here we came from Asia. My tribe loves Asian culture.
Yeah.
As a Black American, my people also love Asian culture because you got to see a non-white protagonist on screen. So that influenced a lot of our upbringing. You can find like almost any Black or Latino in our age group and know like love Dragon Ball Z, like love,
or WWF.
or WWF, like there's a lot of things that like, come in the media and influences, right? And I was confused because there's so much Asian influence in my family. I mean, I've been messing with Kung Fu, been doing Aikido, even Taekwondo, Tang Sudo, karate. My dad always loved a lot of stuff, but it was never really taught to me where these things came from. And a lot of our culture was disbanded. I mean, whether you're Black or a red Indian, a lot of us have just this general mixture with each other, whether we end up physically mixed or just growing up around each other. We develop such a strong identity with these things without like really understanding our history and our culture. And so for it not to die down, a lot of our ancestors like to bring, like the older people like to bring them back. So that's what led me to want to understand more about my Siksika Blackfoot roots. But then there's also this Cherokee thing where Cherokee seems to be the biggest tribe of admixture because of the whole Trail of Tears. So, and then like slavery. So there's a lot of people that get mixed with Cherokee in and out. Like, you don't really know who's making it up, who isn't making it up. But then I hear of a history that tells me that Black people are the first indigenous people here. And then the Mongols came over the Bering Strait later.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I haven't really
I'll tell you this.
white people
The Mongols
support that. But a lot of Black people support that, and I'm thinking, why should we choose one culture's denotion of history over another?
And I
And
don't
there's
think it's
so much
and I
about
don't
that.
think it's okay. So it can, sometimes, because this is a new thing and Black people are becoming proud because a lot of Black people around the world have been deprived through media and paper or whatever, paper genocide, have been deprived of that identity. So it's at first going to come off as racist because the people are angry, and people are, and when they figure out some certain truth that's scientifically backed, they're going to talk about it and they're going to present it in a way that's passionate. Eventually, that's gonna cool down because evidence and science is gonna prevail. I'm saying this once again, not in a racist way, just in the truth. Um, like the first, I know they're saying like Black people are the first, but they're probably thinking, like, because they're so passionate and not delving deep in it, they're probably thinking the modern Black person, like right now, like how I look, how you look. The first indigenous Americans obviously were so-called Black people, but they're not, in a sense, the Black people of how you and I look. They looked more closely to Melanesian. Yes, they had curly hair and all that, but they had, like even, you see how so-called Native Americans, they have that long nose or whatever, the big nose. That comes from the Melanesians. Look at Melanesians' noses. Look how thick and long they are. That comes from them. What do you call it? Yeah, so those are the original Americans in a sense. And then the Mongols who came, and also the Mongols, and this is just based on evidence, the Mongols who came from the north, who have nothing in common with me. Also, they don't tell you this. They were darker. They were darker than the first wave of Mongols who came obviously were darker. And then the other Mongols who came again to the Bering Straits in later years were of lighter skin because of that mixture the Huns and all the Siberians had with the albinos in Europe. They came in waves. So, the first Mongols who came from north had darker skin. The second wave of Mongols had lighter skin. Also, another thing they don't tell you is the Pacific slavery changed the skin color of the indigenous mix of Black Mongols and Black indigenous Melanesians in the Americas. I learned that the Spanish, over a course for over almost 100 years, the Spanish brought over 100,000 Filipinos to the West Coast, to Mexico, California, and whatnot. Over 100 years, there was the Pacific slavery people don't talk about. And then those people, those the lighter Filipinos who were brought as slaves, had a mixture with the short stature Filipinos who were lighter, had a mixture with the indigenous people. So that then their children got characterized as Native Americans or whatever. And then you have a lot of Filipinos who also imported, a lot of Filipino tribesmen who were imported to the Americas too, who were classified as Native Americans, because whoever controls the paperwork, they control how history, what do you call it? They dictate how that's what I like to call it, paper genocide. But if you look at things in a DNA based and bones, you take the sample from the bone, from the oldest humanoid bones found in America. The oldest humanoid bones match those of Aboriginal Australians and Melanesians. That's the closest relative to the oldest bones found in the Americas. That's why you'll see people claiming, the topic, like, it just went to a completely different direction when people are now Black people are without, like, I want people to like understand how, and when they say that Black people and the indigenous, like, understand it in a deeper way, because yes, they changed over time, but it's not so and so. You might have some distant DNA from it, but even that DNA is like so mixed and gone, because there was already a mixture. There was already a mixture from when the original Black people got here. They had mixed with other groups of races that came before the white man, other races or groups that kept coming here. They had mixed. So that DNA became like a ghost DNA. It's distant, and the closest thing people can match that DNA are the Melanesians. Now, modern Black Americans, it's rare for them to find distant Aboriginal DNA, but they can find recent Native American DNA that possibly looked Black, because they also already were in a mixed group with other groups before the white man came. So the recent Native American DNA that Black Americans have is a recent, probably like the last 500 or 600 year
Native Americans who mixed with each other, 700 years, who mixed with each other to become like a group that had dark skin. So yes, Black people have that game. But
that's something that I would like to clarify, have some clarity on, because to work with that analogy, my family with the indigenous, it's hard to know what's what, when's where. I'm just looking at how people are living.
Oh yeah, and I also need to define the time frames too, because I'm saying all these things without. I need to say the timestamps of when these things are. I apologize. Yeah,
it's very. I mean, like you said, the Negrito movement. You have the Mongol movement.
Yep.
And then I don't know if there was ever any people straight from Africa into Central or South America.
The only people who came from Africa, I'd say, are tradesmen who came before, because they're the ones who showed Columbus. I'd say like Moors, Berber Moors, but they came. They came in the later stages. Like they were not like the first people. The Africans were not the first people here.
But you think that they were definitely here before Columbus?
Yes, they were. Yeah, because they're the ones. The Moors from North Africa, the ones who they're the ones who showed. They're the ones who had the maps to come to America. They're the ones who showed Christopher Columbus the route to get to the Americas, to the Caribbean. That's why Columbus, when he got there, he saw a mosque.
There was likely admixture then before Columbus came, and then that would explain because. All right, and then because when I hear like Black people were here, indigenous, like I think there's a difference between indigenous and then here before Columbus, or here before Leif Erikson. Different parts of the continents. But my question is, there's this perception that when Black people, so there was a white guy, he was telling me that I look Black. He didn't know that I was First Nation. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of mixture, but I'll bring up something funny. So my dad, he doesn't like this term like Black when it comes to people or not being indigenous or whatever, because you have white people all over the world. Like you have white people in Australia, you have white people in America, and they'll say, well, they're Europeans. They just came, and then they'll give a historical account. But then when they see Black people in a place, they'll just say they were either brought through slavery or they were a totally separate group of people. And I can kind of understand, because it's kind of messed up to say white people came from one way that only white people tell you. And then Black people couldn't have possibly been smart enough to voyage through the oceans and get to places before them. But yet they had a myth of somebody discovering a place that had people that were already there. So my understanding about that is that when you come here and you see these different historical accounts, I question, well, what does the oral tradition say? Because I've also met some Black people who they see my Blackness and then they say, yeah, brother, you indigenous. Yeah, and we're indigenous, but I'm mixed. That's the thing, is I'm mixed, and I know my
it's like for real,
is actually indigenous, and those are the traits I see. But I'm curious about the culture too. But I also know I get my traits from being mixed. I'm not about to discount my ancestors to fit someone's agenda or narrative. We all have a different agenda narrative. So I'd like to calm the ego down and collectively get to the truth. But what I'm saying is red Indians, real Indians, not just a bunch of white people paying $5 pretending to be Indians. Because my question becomes, well, because I sincerely want to know, why don't we have enough Black people that look like me all over America? Like, I shouldn't be a minority, of two different groups.
So this, wow, that's a very deep question, and also going to have a very deep answer that will come from many angles. Yeah. So first of all, I want to start. There was after slavery, or during slavery, or paper genocide happened in different ways. U.S. Marshals used to go, and they'd collect a census in a certain way that they'd without, because this indigenous people, the Black indigenous people, they don't know what the white people are doing with the census. They're just getting counted, and
Yep.
So they were classified under, I think the first term was first they were Indians, and then after Indians they got reclassified to colored, and then after colored, I think like Negro, and also now you have to take into account anybody who looked like a Black person, even though they're indigenous, whether it's the Seminoles, the Cherokee, and all that, they were reclassified as a Black person. And because they were classified as a Black person, and because they went through slavery, because not just the indigenous people were enslaved, but also Africans were brought here in few numbers, and also Black Europeans also were enslaved after the loss of the war, the criminals, prisoners of war. So after the whites gained power, so all these groups of different Blacks who were going through slavery in America got classified under the term Negro. And then because of that, the Black indigenous people are being reclassified. You're kind of relocated to stay with other groups of Blacks who are not indigenous, like the Black Europeans, the Black Irish, the Black Scots, and then also the Africans too. Because those few African slaves actually in North America. But most indigenous Black people end up being reclassified as African, and Black Europeans also were reclassified as African, because most of the slave ships actually went to the Caribbean, and also they went to South America. That's why most African slaves went to. But North America, very few Africans came. So now you have paper genocide, and then you have the paternal side, where the Black Europeans are the ones who pass the names down when they have a child with, because most of the time it was a Black European male having a child with a indigenous woman, and then going forward you have what do you call it? So now, because the paper genocide has been established and you're under the census count as a Black, it validates it with who people mix with. So it kind of like, because now they're mixed, it kind of like washes away that, even though you can find the DNA trace, it kind of like takes some aspects of the oral history and all those other things away. So it's a very complicated, in many angles, it's complicated. But yes, there are many Black Americans actually have, even from what I've seen when they do the family history, the old pictures, even just pictures of like their great-great-grandmother from like the early 1900s and all this, I can tell like now they look more, Black Americans today look more like Africans than the grandparents did, like their great-grandmother. When I see the pictures, I see the Pocahontas hairstyle, like the great-grandparents look like the black and white pictures. They look like they're Black, but they're not Black. Like the hair is like almost straighter and whatnot. So that from collecting, I think they were more like closer to indigenous in the past than they are today because of all that mixture under the guise of being Black. If you get what I'm saying.
That's very interesting, man. 'Cause that's like saying it's like African comes to America, and then then we become literally more African American, which is. But then again, that's why I'm also interested in my ties and my ancestral ties with Africa, because then I want to understand a little bit about that, because that's an idea to me, is when somebody's dark, and they have like what they call 4C kinky hair, or some call 9 ether hair.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing about 9 ether hair in us that resembles the cosmos and the curliness and consciousness, and a lot of interesting concepts. What I'd like to understand a little bit is, well, I'm curious on, people will see me and say, oh, he looks Black, right? I'm what country, like what country? And then not only that, but then there's these stories of Samoans, back to Samoans again, right? In Long Beach, where they were out there surfing, and this white woman starts yelling at them like, yeah, like get out the water, niggers. And they're like confused, thinking they must have thought they were Black people with good hair,
They're just ignorant. That's ignorance.
And then there's this concept, right? So if people see the Black in you, like, are they just talking about your skin? And then to make it more confusing, and the indigenous in Australia are called Black. And then And then, but you talk about admixture. I definitely noticed there's admixture. It seems like all over the world because
Yep.
I noticed that when you
Everybody
go to
mixed.
East Africa, people start to look more like Southeast Asians. It's like I mean, if we could look at the map again,
Yep.
hey Danny, can you pull up that map again? I just noticed that like all the people start to look
Remember what I was
like
telling you about when they start, but they retain the black skin. But remember, I told you that's where the first Caucasians came from East Africa. Then they migrated to India.
if we back out a little bit. I noticed that. So when I was in Seattle, where there was a lot of, there we go. So there's Africa and then there's India, right? And then
Yep.
there's Asia and there's Europe. Like there's Australia. I think it's funny. Now we got the whole planet. Or wow, I think it's funny is when I was in Seattle, there's a lot of Indians, and then
Yeah.
a lot of East
They
Africans, like
like
Ethiopians.
Somali looking or Ethiopian origin type who have Caucasian
I
features.
I'll be asking like Ethiopians, like, you ever get mistaken by Indians for Indian? And they're
Ah,
like, yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One girl, I asked her in another place, like I think I was in Vegas. I was like, she's like, yeah, and like she said that some of them will argue with her, be like, no, 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 no way, you're African. Like you have to be mixed. You have to be mixed. And she's like, no, she's saying I'm mixed. And then people tell me Ethiopians are mixed. I'm saying, but I mean, I don't think they're inbred. Like I feel like everybody has some mixture going on. But what I think is interesting is you see Asia and Africa right there. People start to look more similar. I mean, there's Madagascar
And you
down
know,
there like the
uh,
west off of South Africa. You
yeah.
go northwest, you see Madagascar. I mean northeast. Dang, I've been saying west earlier. Northeast.
I know what you meant.
There's Madagascar
You look
in
there,
the
the
center of the map,
you know,
and
similar.
you know
You go from Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, some parts of Sudan. Then you go to Arabia. The bottom part, you go to Yemen, the southern part of Yemen, go all the way to Yemen, and then you go to the southern part of Iran, going all the way to India. You notice there's a similar phenotype. People share a very similar phenotype, and that's
similar
evidence.
phenotype.
Uh,
Yes,
the the dark skin, straight hair, thin lips, yeah, long nose, but
all over the world, all over the world, right? You're gonna notice people start to resemble. That's why you go to Europe, you're going to start seeing people look more and more like each other. And then you go up to Sweden and Norway and Finland, and you're going to start seeing more blonde hair.
yeah,
And then then you're going to go to Eastern Europe. As you approach Asia, you're going to start seeing white people that look half Asian. You're going to
yeah,
start seeing people that look white to Asian to,
like
you go to
Kazakhstan.
Asia or even if you go to Southeast Asia and you start seeing really dark Asians that appear black or blacker, or Cambodia, then you go through
Yep.
like
The darker
all over
ones.
the
Yeah.
world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we go over to America, my perception was a lot of people kept looking at my eyes and other features and saying, you look like you have some Asian in you for sure. We all got some Asian in us, Genghis Khan. But I'm saying likely, I could say some of that would be from the Irish because there's some features about being Irish that can make a person look kind of like I don't know, like certain features that people associate with Asian, but most of
Yeah.
it would be the red Indian features.
Well,
And
you.
what I'm saying
Mhm.
is from all the way to Alaska, all the way down to South America, you see indigenous tribes that do resemble more like an offset of Asian. Straight,
Yeah.
really straight, dark hair. I
Yeah.
didn't inherit that, but like super dark
Yeah.
and really straight hair.
Yeah.
My
And that
question
makes
was
sense.
if it was black people, then like why would the whole region have they don't look the same, but they still maintain similar features.
Yeah.
Especially if you said the Negritos came when they had like curly hair.
Yes.
Like why don't we see that throughout North and South America? It looks kind of like it looks
Because it's in different ways, different people,
one direction.
different people. The good question. Good question. Um. So once again, a lot of some admixtures happen before people came to America for them to have straight hair. Some straight haired mixture has been there for almost 60,000 years because of bottlenecking, but they still maintain the black skin and Asian eyes. Some comes from mixing, and then different groups, different timetables when they arrive to the Americas. So it's just it's a big complex thing that's always moving and changing. But yes, the Asians who were dark, the dark ones who came from the Bering Strait, dark but had straight hair and smooth skin. Yeah, those are that's very common. That was common in ancient. Actually, if you look at the original Chinese, they had slanted eyes, super dark, and a lot of them were genocided. They look like but slightly thinner build, slightly thinner face than the indigenous people who had whiter faces. But yeah, the original Chinese who were darker, with thin, then straight hair, thin eyes, thin lips, the original Chinese, they have similarities too to the indigenous people. So you see one thing in common in the old world. In the old world, people retain old world as not supremacy, just the fact is they retained melanin on the skin, even though they were different, even though they're Asian, even though they're Caucasian, Australasian. Every race began with dark skin. Almost every race.
And you said the Asian eyes were the oldest
the oldest
phenotype eyes.
Yeah, I say that because I have relatives. There's lots of. It's harder to tell with super dark people, especially in Africa. But I think right now they say Asians are the most so-called Asian, light-looking Asian are the most populous in the world, like by billions. I believe it's dark black people, so-called black people are more than that. But yeah, you go all over Africa. Doesn't matter what tribe, even the Clicking Khoisan ones who are lighter skin, or even the Sudanese, the tall ones like Manute Ball. Look at the Dinka tribe. All of them have Asian eyes, but it's hard to tell because they're super dark. So people don't pay attention to that because other things pop out. The thick lips and the thick nose and the thick cheeks. So like people are like looking at the features and not seeing, and also being dark and not seeing that they have Asian eyes. Asian eyes is the most common phenotype. That phenotype of slanted eyes comes from always being around through ancient times, being around lots of windy things, dusty, all that, like whether you're in snow, windy air. So your eyes, through evolution and through admixture, with each other, there's an extra layer of overlapping. I can't say fact, but it's I forgot what it was. I don't want to say something wrong, but you evolve to your eyes evolve that way to protect from the wind. And then you have other humans, right? Like you have the pygmies, one of the oldest races in the world, the pygmies in Africa too, who are hundreds of thousands of years old. But their eyes are not slanted. Their eyes are wider, bigger, because they're in a rainforest. They stay in forests, so there's no wind but humans who branched out, humans who always stayed on the outside and branched out of Africa and all that stuff, they tended to have slanted eyes, no matter how dark they are.
Man, I wanted to find this picture when I was in Mexico of a statue, because I noticed that there have been every now and then I'll see something that reminds me of Africa. And it was very interesting. It was the shape of this woman as a statue.
Yeah.
And there was this certain indigenous people that I'd meet, and they had what you mentioned, the thicker lips, the thicker bones. And I would say, you know what? The only people I've met in my life that resembled these people were African.
Yep.
And I was thinking, okay, there's a connection there.
Yeah.
So, that's probably what everybody's talking about then when they say that the indigenous people, but the hair thing was still something for me to look at too, because again, these would be another group of people that have the thicker features, but still not have the curly hair.
Yeah.
But then there's people who will say, well, black people aren't the only people on the planet with 4C kinky hair. And then I'm thinking, then what makes a person black? Really, how do you look at somebody and say they're black, but then they look black, but then you say, okay, but they come from Micronesia, or they come from...
Yeah, they look black because everybody in the whole world is the original people everywhere, the people migrated to be everywhere and evolved to be whoever they were after their migration and mixing or whatever, were so-called black people. But I don't know, being black or brown or whatever, being those darker hue colors, that's what's inside. In scientific terms, that's what's considered normal. So yes, people, they're not the same. They're different races, but they shared black skin, but they're literally different races of people.
But and so we're ultimately all just human, but we
Human,
have
all
I
human.
mean,
People are human. All of us, we're humans. All of us. We all share the same experiences, and some of them just different from each other. Whether it's through evolution, being in a certain area, diet, mutation, the mutation, whether it's mutation of the skin color, whether it's mutation of the hair because it starts from the top, mutation of the eyes, all these different things, and also so all humans are the same. Literally, all. So we're all Homo sapiens. One thing we all have in common is we're Homo sapiens. Yeah.
I've heard it mentioned to me that black people and everybody on the planet, except for white people, for some reason, have. No, this is literally how it's been said to me.
Yeah.
It's been said to me that black people have genes that, like at the full genoscope or something, like every gene, but then
Yes.
white people don't have certain genes. But
because so-called white people are a sub-race of a fully human black person, and that's not a diss. It literally is because all these phenotypes are all these phenotypes, whether it's the Mongol phenotype, whether it's the Caucasian phenotype, or the Australasian phenotype, all came from the Negro phenotype. How they got there, whether it's through selection or evolution or whatever, it doesn't matter. They all got there somehow, but they all come from the Negro bone structure phenotype.
So it's also been told to me that the Caucasian one was the only one that was missing these things in the gene and everybody else had it.
No, that's not necessarily. Because there's because Caucasian, the people, when people say Caucasian, they think of like skin color. Caucasian is a bone structure, and the Caucasian is like a Somali, like an Ethiopian bone structure, or like a Southeast Asian, the dark ones. That's a Caucasian.
So an Ethiopian and a South Indian are Caucasian.
Yes, phenotypically, with how the thin lips and the long nose, and then also the cave ridges. Then the skull shape, and then because they don't have the Negro, what's the thing, pragmatism, where the jaw, like where Negro bone structure tends to have the elongated jaw. They don't have that. So Caucasians share the jaw that's a little bit backwards, thin lips, long nose, and straight hair.
The more we talk about it, it feels kind of like. It feels silly, like to focus so much on people, like to be.
I mean, it's the truth. You're trying to understand. I'm just, it's just
right. I feel like when we talk about it for a long time, like, dang, like people really like look at it, every little thing about each other. Where it was like, from a larger perspective, it seems silly.
And it's I'm not coming at it like to be like
right.
I'm not coming at it like, oh, like you're different than me, I don't like you. It's just understanding the differences. Like in Africa we do that too. Like we all, when we meet each other, we have to, if someone looks different, we always have to introduce like, oh, what's your name? Then we hear the name. Oh, you're this tribe. Okay, then like, so we always ask each other what tribe we are. And it's not like in a bad way. It's like just getting to understand each other. And also we always point out, oh, you're from this tribe. I noticed you guys this and this, and you look like this. And then we point out our differences, but like in a healthy way, not like in a like you're like looking down on someone.
We should definitely normalize that for sure.
Yeah.
For a lot of this, definitely doing that more often. I'm gonna have to talk with you some more about that and learn a little bit more about that, and and integrate that into my culture. So I don't feel like I'm looking down, but I've experienced a lot of people looking down in different ways. I mean, it made fun of me, growing up in this country, man. I mean, got made fun of for like a lot of things, man. Like how.
But things are balancing out. I mean, things are getting
definitely
because of
my eyes.
things. I was gonna say things are balancing out because racism is like, it's getting old. We're getting globalized. Racism was just like a tool. Racism was like a tool to like separate, the elites. But now it's all about, because now thinking of, it's good to understand those things, but focusing too much will drain you from the ultimate goal of who you want to be. So now it's just the new racism is classism, So It's just who has it and who doesn't. That's why I believe so much in innovation. And I think innovation is, if you don't have anything and you have an innovator in your group and someone who can get shit done, and like-minded people get shit done, that's how you can, elevate. But right now, like all those things, like, talking about me, like, I think it's good to like you said, it's good to like talk about, understand the differences, but like, let's not get offended by it, because we're understanding each other.
Or even angry when somebody doesn't understand.
Like, exactly. Yeah, that's what I realized. When I came to America, I realized, man, yeah. Each time I say this, Black Americans get mad at me, but Black Americans, it's like they have to understand they're in such mental chains, man. Like, it's like they feel like they have this right to just be easily offended, and that's like you're regressing. It's like you're regressing yourself. Well, I'm not okay. Of course, you should be mad because of what happened. And what continues to happen and all this. But if you continue to like react that way, it's like you're holding yourself back from like growing to be something greater than that. Because black people have been through too much. Black people around the world and Black Americans have been through too much. But getting like when someone is curious about something and they're clueless and just like, I believe if you're the better, like if you think you're the better person or whatever, you should have some level of grace of understanding, right? So if someone is curious, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just like, okay, this person is, I'm not going to get mad at them, like I'm just going to help teach them, right? So
100%. Danny uses that word a lot, and we're in agreement on that. Grace has been the common word, and then you just brought it up, like grace.
Yeah.
Like we're figuring. When I hear grace, I'm thinking of God's presence and aligning to that way of thinking, aligning to that. I feel like I think in Hinduism that would be called moksha, where we join the total creation instead of the total, not creation, but the actual whole reality. I see it as heaven too. Like, just being able to understand perspectives of this individual thing, the ego can really hold a lot of people back from integrating. And that's definitely it's a deceptive thing within us all when we're unable to integrate because of a deep blindness. There's a deep repression present, and that can also show us a denial of what is actually going on, because we want to preserve our ego's hold on something, and then very dark self-destructive emotions start to come out and play in reality, which we were talking about the last time, on how certain cultures, they have like different, I think every culture has a different triggering point for sure, to be fair. I was talking a lot about white people though, and coming off with, I think it comes from having a pristine ego of showing yourself off to be totally in control and totally fine and totally confident, totally with everything. And then when something left field approaches, see the look in their eye just switch, and it's like real serious, and then the vibe changes. And so I like to just focus on a spiritual culture of every individual understanding what are they really feeling. If somebody's smiling at you, but they're just like, have a nice day. Yeah. But you feel the tenseness and you feel this, and it's supposed to come from
easy. It's not easy flowing. It's like they're not easy with themselves. It's like
I've seen a lot of that in Canada. It was more so in Canada. It was hard to read. And I felt strange because this is supposed to be like my homeland. First, my first experience in Canada was like, people were.
That's crazy, because when I went to Canada, like all the white folks they're just curious about me. They're just like, hey, everybody was just like nice. Everybody was just so happy to meet me.
They're very. I like how they socialize in Canada a lot more than here in the States.
Yeah.
But I also feel I feel a stronger ego and a less connection to the unconsciousness.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. There can be an ego can be interested in something, but like, is it aware of when it's not flowing in that direction?
And I'd say this, because when did you go to Canada again? That was
like maybe a couple weeks ago.
Oh wow! See, there you go. Because times have changed. See, when I last went to Canada, I went to Canada in 2010. And social media was not like was not really big like that. So people like how the world operated was different. And then on top of that too, like I'm not like you know, I recently, I'd say this last 3 years, I've just started to be able to be more emotionally intelligent because I'm asking myself the right questions, and I'm actually learning. I go to therapy so I can understand, so I can learn how to just even explain, so I can learn how to talk about my emotions. I didn't know how to talk about my emotions. So there's certain things probably that I was blind to noticing when I first went to Canada that you're able to see. That's why I said when I went there, you know, it just seemed like everybody just like nice, but there are things I was not looking for because I'd not gone through enough life experiences to notice those things.
Man, that's very transparent of you. And, you know, and we all have blind spots. And that's, like you mentioned, it could be, you know, that could be a section in your shadow. Just like certain logistics have been sections in my shadows, which is why I like to slow down and then integrate before I formulate an opinion, because the opinions will be shouting from the dark, from out of nowhere, and then there won't be any. I have to really slow it down, and that's why I like to make that the persona. You know, the persona is something I would like to focus more into, because it helps people with shadow work, which gets rid of the midlife crisis. It turns into like a midlife transition, as opposed to the crisis of, you know, am I living up to my life's potential? Am I doing this correctly? Did I just waste all my time? I should have done better 30s, 40s, whatever, like things are going to, you know, like we don't have to really freak out. But when we integrate like that part of ourselves and we understanding our strengths, we begin to understand our shadows, which is why I'm integrating another point. Fortunately, I was talking about these in my podcast. I'm mentioning how one cannot live too long in the light because you can be blinded by the light. This is when you only know your ego. You face world success, but like we mentioned, without the soul.
That
when
is
the
clear as
person,
day.
you
Wow.
know, does not look at the shadow, they're blinded by the light. So they're just egotistical and become, I would say, like a paper man, just like super strong, super good. But then as soon as they have to deal with the ugliest aspects of their self, they become crippled with something that they cannot escape.
Literally.
Versus when a person does not, when a person just, the opposite can be true too. When we focus on nothing but the shadow, and we're just like, when you learn about shadow development, like what? I can be a stronger person. I can face my fears. I can go in my shadow. If we stay in the shadow, we will be consumed by it. And it's like going undersea in a submarine and just like running out of air. It's like getting swallowed into the abyss. Like you need your ego to comprehend what's going on.
Yeah.
But you have to have your ego handled and balanced. And then you do your shadow work where you stay in the light and then you're in the shadow. And then you approach the collective shadow. Because now when you're dealing with the collective shadow, this is like dealing with outer space. You got a damn space shuttle, which I would say is the planet, you know, with the sun. You get in harmony with following the earth follows the sun, catapulting through space, and then you channel in the rest of the cosmos. But you need to have your priorities: ego, unconscious, collective unconscious. Bam. But if the shadow gets inhibited, get the fuck out of the collective unconscious and focus on the shadow. If the shadow gets heavy, get back to the ego. But if you only stay in the ego, it's like being a big ass fish in a small pond. So, you know, so I'm teaching like balance and all that. And, you know, I love to like go in deeper about what you're doing. This was also I was going to go into the need of so I do soul map sessions with people. And we were talking about when I can mention the need of a soul map. I combine all of what I just mentioned with Jungian psychology and then show you where they combine with Freudian psychology. And this is when we get to establish your MBTI, your type, and then you can see in your chart like how this goes. But where the soul maps really start to go in is when I start diving into other older traditions such as astrology, numerology, and different philosophies and other things that I haven't even named yet, but they all intersect in different sections, which help us to get a clear view of not only why we do what we do, but why things happen to us the way they do. Because life, believe it or not, is just a giant hall of mirrors. Like You feel me? We think we're individuals having an experience, but really we're only experiencing ourselves.
It's crazy how many people I've met who are experiencing what I'm going through, and they explain like in detail how they felt and what. It's like, whoa! So I'm not alone.
Right. And I gotta ask you, how have you been feeling with that bracelet you bought from us? I think you bought a hematite.
Yes. Oh, I love the bracelet. I it's helped. There are moments where like, I was going through a phase. Like when you met me, that's when me and my wife like separated. Like 2 days before that, it was bad. But the bracelet has helped me. It's kept me grounded. I've tried. At first I was like a hermit. I wasn't feeling anything because I was staying inside the house, and I reached a really low point. And I just forced myself, my mom, everybody talking to me. I just forced myself to just go to the backyard, just at little steps, just standing in the sun. Then after you're standing in the sun, getting enough courage to, because I really miss my children, get enough courage to just like walk, just take a walk, just even taking a walk. Now I've graduated to the point where, because all these things was easy. It's easy to do all these things when everything is going good. It's easy to face adversity when everything is like taken care of, with your parents and all that. But when you're like, as an adult, you're facing adversity, and especially when it has to do with children and all those kind of things, it's different. It's a different type of thing. So it's like, I'm finding the strength in a way I've never felt before. That was difficult. And the bracelet helped me out because, when I start getting the sun and now like exercising and all those kind of things, it really, I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it grounding me, especially after I do a workout, especially after I don't eat, if I don't eat, like I'm fasting, I'm finding myself fasting out of stress. Then eventually, like actually like fasting, like for real. And then exercising, and I just feel it. I feel my veins, my arms, everything. And yeah, like, it's like chaotic, but like calm, like I'm grounded, like I'm not reacting how I should. I'm not reacting in a way that would be destructive, even towards myself when no one is around.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, man. We always make them with love, and that's the thing. Like, there are people who get afraid of the bracelets too because they'll have a religious they'll have a religious culture about it, and their community will just bash them working with anything and believing that there's any medicinal qualities to it. And I'm not I'm not, even though I speak and I do value the spirit is within everything, first and foremost. But these bracelets are not any different from you drinking tea or taking Tylenol. It's just that they don't have those negative effects that Tylenol would have. Like, this isn't a strange chemical concoction. These are stones, which are minerals, which form crystal patterns under the earth, from under the earth, for thousands to some millions of years. This is God's creation untampered with. And then we form them into something that you can wear and feel, that you vibe with. It's not, this isn't about a belief as much as a physical reaction that we just don't know on every detail with. And I would even challenge some people to think about the things that they accept in their life, such as you mentioned Tylenol, or even the clothes they wear.
Yeah.
If we were to tell you that, like, these shorts made of polyester are going to cause your testosterone to go down because of what phthalates.
Yeah, because our skin our skin eats this stuff up, ingesting.
There's no need to have a religious debate about it. This is science, but we don't know every detail of science. But
exactly,
I like to ask people, like, do they really know spiritually in their heart whether something's wrong? Because even if you don't want to believe in something, it's not going to affect the ultimate gist of what it can do to you. You might not believe that wearing polyester will you do something with your endocrine, will disrupt your endocrine system in any way.
Yeah.
But God also gives us good sense. I mean, unless you believe that you can program reality every step of the way and nothing you do matters, then hey, that's completely on you. But for those who truly have spiritual senses and aren't just being spiritually blinded by the spirit of a deceiver, and making their life more about their community than their actual connection with reality, with God, with their higher self, with the spirit, with love, then none of this stuff would be for you. I mean, until you actually want to handle. But the benefits that you're experiencing are attributed to the hematite itself, which I'm wearing too.
Yeah.
But then whenever we beat them, I also pray directly to God in Christ Yeshua's mighty name. If you believe in Jesus, whether you want to use the word Jesus or you want to say Yeshua because there was no J in that language, there's no J sound in that language during that time. If you believe in Jesus, then what you'd be experiencing would be from that love. But even if you don't believe in Jesus because you don't know of Jesus or not, if you believe in love, that's all it's coming from. And love will make a difference in anything. I mean, even if you cook a meal, if you have love in it, people will feel it. Versus if you have hate, you can look at somebody love. You don't even have to see them. If you hear them on the phone and they have love, you will feel better. So we're just amplifying what's already there, just like driving home and you want to pray that you're going to get home safe.
Yeah.
You don't have to say, I don't believe in vehicles and cars because, cars are machines. I believe in God, but you're using the machine still, just like you're using your body. It's, but people will come up with all kinds of meanings behind different spiritual deceptions to get them to turn away from something. But like I say, if you just believe in love or you believe in learning, I even let people know you don't have to buy a bracelet. You can literally just feel the love and heal from our interaction. But if you don't see love, but you see condemnation, judgment, and shame or guilt, then you're probably not worshiper of God. You probably don't care about God like you think you do. You probably have been fooled into following the enemy. It sounds like a heavy statement, but that's why I mentioned the great spiritual deception. Reverse speech is revealed. There are a lot of deceivers. Something that I think we could all agree on is it doesn't matter what you call yourself if you're telling a lie. If you don't mean what you're saying, it does. It doesn't matter if you call yourself an atheist. It doesn't matter if you call yourself a Christian. It doesn't matter if you call yourself, an enemy worshiper. It doesn't matter if you call yourself evil. It doesn't matter if you call yourself a teacher, a hero. If you're not meaning what you're saying, you can find a liar in any house, whether you call it a church, an apartment, a mansion, or a street corner. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what words you use. Honestly, if your heart is in the wrong place, your message is in the wrong place. And that's just my message for the people who get fooled into believing that they're following God.
Yeah.
But they're not connecting to any love or understanding, but just judging by their own.
Just blindly and you're gonna go crazy if you're blindly following something. It's like you need to first understand where you stand. And you brought up a lot of good points, man. Is it coming out of love in everything you do? Right? Even if you're going through a rough patch, at least are you being honest with yourself? Do you all the if you're honest with yourself and it's coming out of love, all these things, belief, once belief starts to set in and you've built a foundation, you can flourish. You like you said, it's easy to spot a liar. It's on all those false doctrines when people don't believe in themselves. It doesn't matter how they're presented. If someone looks if they don't even believe in what they're saying, you can already spot the lie. So, man.
I would hope more people to, because I actually believe that no matter how much I learn, it might always still be possible to be deceived and to just accept the lesson and move on, so that we can not be blinded by pride. I think sometimes pride can make us feel like we'll never fall, we'll never be like we'll never be fooled by something, we'll never. Though in reality, it's like, there's something new to learn every day. Is like constantly evolving. But if we have that love, man, you ain't taking no L's if you have love. There's no loss when you have love. It don't matter what it looked like. It'll come back. Whatever
Wow.
because you got love, man.
I really needed to hear that, man. And you put it in a way that I can understand it with what I'm going through right now. So wow.